Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Historically High is proud to present the tag team champions of the world, the Stone Dog Adam. I don't know what mine would be. The badass.
Provocative Professor Chris.
There we go. And then what would our new age outlaw?
I don't know. Super High Professors doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
There you go. The Historically High Historians. Something like that.
Welcome to our Thanksgiving episode.
Yes, happy Turkey and Football Day, everyone.
I know we have more than a few international listeners, so I kind of, in doing this research, it kind of made me wonder, because I don't know what the fuck Boxing Day is.
Yeah.
Do other countries, do you think they know what Thanksgiving is? Because Thanksgiving's sort of a way that we've covered up some mass atrocities with...
Yeah.
We put a bow tie on a turd.
Well, you have the New York Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, so I think...
Probably pretty big,
because
right?
it's so big in our country, and our country is such a melting pot that still has people living in other countries, and we have so many people from our country living in other countries, that they're probably aware to a degree that there is a day called Thanksgiving that takes place in November in which they eat a shit ton of food and watch football all day. And have reason to do so.
It does feel like the most American holiday for those reasons.
It does. That's what it is. It's the all-American challenge. Listen, spend a shit ton of time waking up early, cooking all this food. Can you make it on time? You end up making it on time. Good. Now eat so much of this food that you can't possibly eat anymore, and then fight the just unending need to sleep while you want to watch the two other football games that are going to be on that evening.
Yeah, for some reason we cook. Well, I think it's probably because, was it Ben Franklin that was a big fan of the turkey?
I'm not sure where that came from.
We cook like the most unnecessarily not great tasting bird.
We're getting to the point where we have had enough trial and error. Like this year, where we know about brining now and everything.
There's ways to do it, but at the same time, there's a lot easier fowl to cook than a turkey.
There is, but I think what you're looking for is mass.
But why?
I don't know.
Because we're a country of gluttons.
Well, we're not talking turkey today. What we are talking about is a man. And learning about this guy, I think everyone has heard this name. I don't know someone on the playground that never shouted this, jumping off anything, or, at some point heard this name uttered within, school history or anything like that. But we're talking Geronimo today. And I don't know what even my assumption of Geronimo was before this, but I'm excited because it's he's such a fascinating guy.
He taught me so much more this whole research period about sort of Native American communications with outsiders.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize, seeing pictures of Geronimo, which is just nuts to think that we were seeing a picture of a Native American that lived that long ago. That's how old photography is.
Yeah.
But seeing pictures of him, dressed in not really cavalry uniforms, but actual clothing beyond what you would think
like a
the trope
three-piece
is.
suit. What would pass as a three-piece suit? You got the vest under the button-up shirt, the vest underneath, and then a jacket on top.
I didn't realize that part of their trading with villages and shit did include clothing, so it wasn't all just we have to go kill this antelope so I can make pants.
He's like, does this keep me warm? Okay, cool. And it wasn't just about trading and everything like that. I'm sure a lot of this was acquired by other means. But yeah, we are about to get into Geronimo. Remember, as always, rate, review, subscribe, hit those buttons, guys. We appreciate it, and keep providing us your feedback. We love getting your emails and your comments. And so, without further ado, strap on your moccasins because we're going into Geronimo. All right, so just straight out of the gate, the longevity of this guy. I don't know if it's not the most impressive thing, but it's insanely impressive.
When you kind of find out how many people he outlived to the end of his life, it's pretty damn incredible just how old he was. Because, I mean, 80-ish years old? Almost 80
79.
79,
I think he almost made it. So he was born 1829.
I already got to say, I don't know if I buy that because I don't know what the day record keeping was for a Native
That's why I just said
tribe.
that's why I said the year.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how much accuracy there is in the June 16th. But here's the thing is, again, if they're, we find out how they keep records and everything like that, we're basically just able to try to decipher that, maybe.
Yeah, I guess if you
Can
say
we agree
like
on 1829?
the third harvest moon, the fifth harvest moon of 1829 was June 16th, that kind of a thing. But it would be incredible if they were that good of record keepers. And just the way that he was born in a place that was, technically he was born in Mexico,
Yes.
but now he's born in America.
So at this time, and he was part of the, do they consider it the Apache Nation?
Yeah.
Because it's a collaboration. It's not just one tribe. Like everyone who's an Apache isn't just an Apache. It's not like an encompassing tribe. You have all of these different bands of Apache.
I think that's pretty similar with like Navajo and
Is it like
Comanche
that?
and all that kind of stuff.
And so they differ by the area that they live in. And at this point, the Apache area would be what would be, I guess, considered like southern New Mexico and Arizona, and then actually into Mexico.
Yeah, very much into Mexico. They were down in by Chihuahua and a bunch of those Sonora.
And
So-
at this point, too, when he's born, I believe is that territory still owned by Mexico?
Yeah,
and Spain?
because we had the Mexican-American War that actually happens during his lifetime.
Okay, so that's what I was getting at. So at this point, he is actually born. This tribe is in Mexico because at this time, I think the only area that we owned was much higher than that. We didn't have what we considered like the California territory.
Yeah, no New Mexico. Obviously, that's how it became New Mexico. No Arizona, parts of Texas, if not all of Texas. We had Oklahoma, I think, pretty established, but that might have been where we were knocking on Mexican door territory.
And then not born Geronimo.
Yeah. Would you like to pronounce it?
Do you know how to pronounce it?
Hell no.
Okay, I think it's Goyal is I remember. I
Goyal?
apologize if
Okay.
that's not, but the one who yawns, which becomes the most ironic thing because nothing about this guy later in life and what he gets into makes you yawn.
No, he's his whole family and upbringing to me, like his parents seem cool as shit. Going through his autobiography, which I'm gonna tell on myself, I didn't read the biography. I listened to the biography, but the way that he grew up and
I don't think there's shame in that. It's just how you
Yeah.
absorb knowledge, man.
I'd like to learn how to read more, but I read enough. His family was kind of cool though. He had, I believe it was like,
His grandfather was the chief,
Yeah.
or a chief, and the tribe that he is actually part of would be but is it the Badonkahe?
he was the Badonkahe, or he was a part of the Badonkahe
Apache.
originally.
Okay.
Something cool that I learned too, and I'm sure you did too, but in Native culture, I guess in Apache culture, when you're a male and you marry a woman, you are then a part of that tribe
Okay.
or that band. Mm-hmm. So that's how he started out Badonkahe, and then he became, I think it's, we'll get to it.
Okay. We're still talking early.
Yeah. His father was not a chief, but he was pretty high up in the elders.
I think he would be because if you're a son of the chief, depending on where he's born, because he was essentially the one of like 4 sons and 3 daughters, I think.
Yeah, I think he had 7, or he was one of 8.
He was one. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it was 4 sons and then 3 daughters.
Yeah, not including him, so 8.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
You're right.
and I'm guessing that that was probably something to where his father also had multiple sons, not meaning that his father was not in line potentially at some point to be chief, but probably older brothers in that situation, but still kind of maintained some status within the tribe. And as he actually, grew up and everything, Geronimo was actually never a chief. He was actually a medicine man.
He was very
Like a
close
shaman.
at the end, but yeah.
Yes. Someone that was still trusted and looked to for leadership and guidance, which is why he's able to kind of gain that leadership over certain bands throughout his life and everything. But yeah, never a chief, which is crazy because throughout his life he gained so much notoriety, but at all these times he's always referring to the chief. He's always deferring to the chief for like major decisions. Like he's never really, with the exception in some situations, making decisions that are speaking for the tribe. He's always deferring to that kind of that hierarchy.
Well, and that was something else that was pretty surprising is a chief sort of makes the decision, but in order for the decision to be ratified, it has to go to the people of the tribe. Mm-hmm. So it's not just a chief's way or the highway, it's a chief's idea, and then it gets run through the people. So fairly democratic in that situation.
The Athenians get over here at any point?
Huh?
Did the Athenians get over here at any point?
Could have.
Is that what they were worried it spread so fast?
That's probably why the natives didn't always
It's
wear a
just
lot
such
of
a
clothes.
common thought, though, like to ask the people that are going under this rule that it's weird that it took so long to gain hold.
Well, and you would think too, if it's your way or the highway and you fuck something up, somebody's definitely going to kill you. So you probably want to go double check, and then if it goes wrong, you'd be like, "Well, you guys said yes too."
Yeah, that's true.
But growing up, his family discipline was always something that he looked back on as to how he grew up. The kids traditionally were supposed to do work within the villages that they lived in. They were nomadic, so they moved around a lot. But part of growing up Apache for them was getting out of work by basically like going and playing hide and seek. And they would hide from their parents during the day. And if you were found, instead of like being yelled at and forced to go back to work, the parents would just be like, "That was a terrible hiding spot. I found you in like 20 minutes. What were you doing?" So there was enough of that playfulness. He said too that when he would
My kid sucks.
yeah, when he would get in trouble and get disciplined, his parents would come up with things like they would send him to a separate village to get something random. And then when he would show up to like his aunt and uncle's place and he would ask for it, they would be like, "Oh, you got in trouble, huh?" And he's like, "Yeah." They're like, "We actually don't have it. You're going to have to go to this village to get that. And then also while you're over there, can you grab me this too?"
Really? So they made him, they basically, the punishment was having to be a fucking gopher?
Yeah, it was more of like a fun punishment. I'm sure it wasn't great traveling that distance, but it was sort of like a playful nature.
Correct, but it's also preparing them for life.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I was just shocked by was they started like around 12 or 13, like training themselves to be warriors. They would hot poker themselves. They would stick like pieces of wood till they got black and hot in the fire, and they would poke themselves with it until they couldn't feel the pain anymore in order to prepare themselves for going out on these war raids. And just
that's what survival was at this point.
Yeah.
These aren't like an agrarian people that are like farming or anything like that. They're nomadic people, and with the tribes, you would have intertribal warfare. You would have wars with completely other like tribes of Indians that weren't like within the Apache or anything like that. And so life is literally a constant just fight for survival against not only nature, but also against like hostiles coming from the outside.
And it all sort of plays into such a perfect harmony because one of the reasons why the Apache were so successful against Mexican battalions and against the U.S. Army and really against anybody was they had such an intimate knowledge of the area that they were in. They knew how to hide. They knew exactly where to go.
Didn't even have to be the area like that they grew up in. It was like they just knew what to do in the area.
Well, yeah.
Like if they came into an area, they're like, well, I can tell by the terrain that the water holes are going to be over here. And they would have such an advantage over pretty much over anyone that came in here. You literally have like when you talk about the numbers of like how large the tribes were in the Apaches versus like these like Mexican troop formations and also like the U.S. Army, you're just like Like, and you guys like got beat?
Well, to speak to them being able to use wherever they were, one of their greatest evasion techniques was when they would run into like you can follow footprints in dirt or anything like that. When they would come to rocky areas, they would actually jump across rocks and make sure not to step off them to leave any footprints. So you could be following 10 sets of tracks until you get to the rocks. And then they were actually smart enough to know that they couldn't leave footprints if they stepped on something solid. So once you hit that field of rocks, you don't know if they went left, you don't know if they went right.
And knowing where that field of rocks is to be like, we can lose the trail here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To go up into the mountains and to be able to find water at these different resources. And it's sort of ironic that.
And you're nomadic.
Yeah,
so like,
you know all of these areas.
That's the whole point
area.
Is like, you're not just like, oh, I know this area because my uncle lives here. It's like, no, 2 years ago, we were actually moving through this area and I spent a year here. Like, you're constantly moving around, learning the terrain. And the fact that the Apache date back to this area in the Southwest between 1,000 and 1,500 Common Era.
Yeah, so well over 1,000 years ago in some respects, just to be able to know that they occupied that land to the point to where they just knew it like the back of their hands. They knew where to go to graze. And this isn't like an area that has a really hospitable climate. Like there's some areas that are just hot as shit and not livable. But during the spring months and during the kind of hotter, colder months, they knew where they could be to continuously be able to.
You're traveling for survival with the weather.
And horses, also found out not native to America. Those were actually brought over by the Spaniards, which would make sense that they came over through Mexico. That was sort of where the Apache figured out, between raids, stealing them, trading for horses, different things like that, they were able to teach themselves to be expert horsemen. And that was one thing that helped them beyond almost anything else, was when you were good on a horse and you could fire a bow and arrow from a horse.
Shoot from a horse.
Yeah, you knew that you were going to have that much more of a leg up on the battlefield. And granted, they didn't have a whole lot to do, so I'm sure they just, like, training horses and breaking horses. Yeah, that was their entertainment.
Fun. Yeah, competition just within, inter-tribal competitions and everything. Well, what kind of kicks off this whole thing with Geronimo is kind of leading up to it, kind of knowing the world that he comes into. So tensions, in the Southwest between essentially like the nomadic Apache and then the Mexicans date back to the 17th century. So basically this is a time, and we've discussed it with the Maya. You basically had the Spanish coming in to the Yucatan portion and then working their way up. Now, we haven't talked about the Aztecs yet because they're going to get hit even after that. But at this point, now you have the Spaniards integrating with the Mexican people, and you get them starting to expand their territory as well. So you have this area in which the Apache have been in for, at this point, over 1,000 years. You now have conflict between the, and essentially just because we're going to be going back and forth between these groups, we're going to have the natives, the Mexicans, and then essentially like the U.S., or we'll just say the Americans or the American Army, the U.S. Army.
Yeah.
So you basically have these people from Mexico that are branching out and looking to establish claim on lands and like start farms and villages and towns and everything like that.
They're exploring for resources.
Exactly. The same thing. It's basically a manifest destiny that the United States had coming from the East Coast. You also have these guys getting pinched by another form of manifest destiny, that bullshit coming up from the South. So their first conflicts ends up being with the Mexicans, and that's really going to shape, I think, the biggest thing in Geronimo's life.
Yeah, definitely like the number one driver in life for him was his dislike of the Mexican people.
So you would have them moving in. You would then have, of course, and these are just like ranchers and farmers and stuff like that. This isn't just like the Mexican military moves in and clears out the whole area and everything. They would wait for problems to pop up, and then they would try to, if they got bad enough, they would send people in, because you're not going to be able to have people branching out if everyone goes out and gets killed by the Apache for encroaching on their land. And at some point, Mexico starts offering, I want to say I got the figures. So they were offering bounties on the Apache for, it was $100 per scalp for the men, $50 for the women and $25 for the kids.
Which I don't want to sound like I'm lumping a lot of these people into the same area, but a Hispanic scalp, I got to imagine, as long as it's black hair, it would probably look like a Native American scalp. Like, what? How would you be able to tell?
It depends if...
I guess hair composition?
Yeah, maybe it was one of these things because this plays in much later once, we basically force not only the Apache but other Native American tribes, force them to assimilate, is what's one of the first things they do? They cut their hair.
Yeah.
I don't know if culturally it was part of that Spanish and then the Mexican people to have long hair. So maybe part of the proof was that, well, this is long hair on this, or maybe I don't know how that works. The whole point of like the scalping and everything like that, every time they say that, I'm like, come on, like, fuck, come on, man. But the fact that there's an actual established like bounty for women and children shows that this wasn't like a war of forcing these. This was like an extermination.
Yeah, there was no, we weren't just fighting warriors. It was warriors and then everything they were protecting.
Yes.
So the care of life and kind of like the humanity of it all.
The value of it, there is none.
None,
For anyone outside of your own group, the value of life is nothing.
And that's where this kind of becomes a little bit difficult. It did, at least at the beginning stages for my research, is you kind of have to be able to put yourself in the mind frame of the Wild West. Like when someone was killed in a village or something like that, and it was a part of a raid, there wasn't really like, hey, we got to go out and get that guy for murder. Like it was more of a retaliatory.
It's lawless. It's still at a lawless time in the West and everything. Not only the fact that it's lawless for essentially like the settlers moving out there, it's even more lawless, essentially, if you're referring to any laws in protection of the native people. That just didn't exist.
No. Everybody kind of had their code.
It's like
ethics.
You killed someone, you're like, what color were they? And they're like, they weren't white. And there's like, oh, well, don't worry about it.
Yeah. But like you say, 1835 is when Mexico finally places a bounty on the Apache scalps. And it is mostly because in this nomadic lifestyle, you tend to need things sometimes that you can't get off the land. And when you know that there's an established place, eventually you're going to go and try to re-up with them, whether it be cattle, any sort of like flour or anything like that.
You're bringing these supplies onto our land.
Yeah.
Which is ours to begin with and everything. But then you're also making that to where we can't use that land. So we feel like, and here's the thing, this wasn't like them knocking on the door of the ranch and be like, hey, we're taking these cows. Mm-mm. It was instantly violent. There wasn't any, hey, don't do that. It was just like when they're coming in to raid these farms and everything like that, of course they're coming in, and in the same way that Mexico is looking at like, we're not going to leave any of these people for us to even have to fight against or worry about. I think on the same side of the Apache, we're just like, well, these people just keep coming, so if we maybe just get rid of these people, then they'll just fucking stop coming because they don't want to end up the same way.
Somebody will get the hint.
Yeah.
Somebody will understand what we mean is business and they need to stay away. Mm-hmm. So you have enough tension to where this Apache scalp bounty comes into play in 1835. That is, 6 years?
He's 6 years old.
Yeah, after Geronimo's born. And it still didn't really stop anything. Like the raiding still continued to happen on the Apache front.
Too. The raiding happens, and it's not only against just farms and everything like that. They start coming into cities that get established. What they're also getting at this point during these raids is, guns and more supplies and better clothes and everything. And you start to see this weird thing, like if you're trying to like stereotypically, unfortunately, picture like Native American, when you see like pictures, especially like Great Plains ones, it's like leather and stuff like that. And it's like the more traditional tribal stuff.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I was so shocked to see him in like actual traditional pants.
Like button up clothes. Yeah, button up shirts and everything, because they were taking this because guess what? If we can get this kind of stuff and not have to spend time making it, and also get food that we don't have to spend time hunting, like this is an easier lifestyle.
That much further ahead.
If we can get guns to be able to defend ourselves instead of just working on bows and arrows, like they're basically, I'm not saying incentivizing it, but these raids are doing nothing but incentivizing the Apache to keep doing this shit.
And that was another thing that kind of took me by surprise, was seeing pictures of Native Americans with rifles. That wasn't quite something that my brain, and maybe it was just the fact that our first real dive into Native Americans was Little Bighorn, and I don't really think that those tribes up there had a lot of access to a lot of rifles, because they weren't running into like militaries and militias yet. It was more like fur traders.
I want to say, I know we did that quite a while back. I want to say some of them did have rifles because they had traded with fur trappers and stuff like that.
But if you have 3 rifles and you have 50 warriors,
You're not getting supplied like the military was getting supplied, like with Custer and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, just to me, thinking of a gun battle between 19th century Mexican militias and Mexican military, and then Apaches. I don't picture that being gun on gun.
No.
I picture that being gun on bows and arrows, spears,
Well,
knives.
you also got to think too, like with these battles that they're fighting and like these little skirmishes, it's literally like 40 Apache warriors against like larger numbers.
Yeah.
So 40 rifles are a lot easier to get.
True. They were little, and one of their best tactics was a lot like the best tactic that we hear in World War II. It was like a blitz. It was quick entry with horses. They would come in, they would attack, they would hit their spots, they would get out immediately. They would go back in. It wasn't just like a sustained force.
It was just smash and grabs.
And so if you're going in there and you're cutting down, 1 or 2 people each time, you do that 15, 20 times, you start taking people out, you kill 4 or 5 of them. Eventually that military will take the loss and just retreat. It's not like full on.
The other thing too is when you're doing this and then you finally do march, the military and they're like the Mexican army, you don't know where these fucking people are. It's not like, hey, our city's under siege. They have time, and by the time they get there, the other army's still there. It's like, no, like this happened like 3 weeks ago. Like they're fucking gone.
Smash and grab.
And
they
then,
were out of here.
like, which way did they head? That way. And you're like, that we can't fucking cross that.
They went into the desert? No, that can't be right.
And so his father actually dies. I'm trying to remember how old he was. I want to say it was a teenager. Maybe a little bit younger.
I think he was an early teen.
Okay. So after his father dies, his mother actually takes the family to live with is it the Chinchinde?
I don't think the
Chinende
T gets said. So yeah, I think it's Chichinde maybe.
And so this is another
band
of the Apache. And at 17, he actually marries a Nedni Chihuahua Apache girl named
Chiricahua.
Oh, that's what it was. Sorry. They mentioned Chihuahua in this because that happened, that they raid into that area.
Yeah.
So I didn't, sorry. Say it again.
Chiricahua.
Chiricahua.
So many of these words sound very similar. Chihuahua, Chiricahua.
It makes sense now that I actually look at the word. And her name was it Alope? Alope. And basically, like you were saying earlier, marrying her turns him into a tribe member. So he's kind of it's like having dual citizenship.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it that way. Part of it is kind of nuts how it all comes about, because basically you have to be, I believe it's 17 to be brought in front of a war council, and that's how you're brought into being into the band of warriors, into the people that go out on the war parties. You have to go out 4 separate times without being a member of the party and like learn the lingo, learn how you would attack on the battlefield and all that kind of stuff.
Train.
So when
you're like an apprentice.
Yeah, when you're brought into the warrior or the war rating,
you're already up to speed.
You know exactly what you're doing. Yeah. And so he goes out, he does
like a form of their basic training. Yeah.
I didn't, that's kind of the perfect example of it. Is it's a run through before in basic training. Then you go in front of the war council. You have to be voted in. Everybody there has to say yes. If they say no, you have to continue going out on kind of like this go back to basic training and be trained again. Well, he was very, very good. His father had very good standing in his original tribe. And so once he came of age, then you're able to go out and try to marry. So he became a warrior, went on a few war raids, ended up finding Alope, goes to her dad and says, "Hey, can I marry Alope?" He goes, "Yeah, you're going to have to bring me back X
You want some ponies, right?
Yeah.
I love the fact that they use the term ponies.
Yeah, you're going to have to bring me back X number of ponies. He gives him just an insane number because he didn't really want them marrying. Geronimo goes out and brings him back the exact amount that he wanted and comes and drops the ponies off. He's like, okay, what's next? Anything else?
I gave Geronimo an impossible task. Yeah.
And somehow he pulled it off. And by all accounts, and basically what fuels him
let's not beat around the bush. He doesn't go out and find these ponies.
No.
Like, he goes out and exemplifies his prowess as a warrior and everything and fucking murders some people and takes these ponies.
He found them. They were just in somebody's corral.
I'm trying to be equal opportunity for everything because there's just a lot of murder. But
yeah. So, him and Alope are married. They end up having 3 children.
Now, who's her father? Because he becomes the son-in-law of this guy.
His father is Mangus Coloradus, right?
Her father is Mangus Coloradus.
Her father's Mangus Coloradus.
Her father. So not only, and here's the big deal about this, he's not just marrying this Neni Chiricahua tribe member, Alope. Her father, Mangus Coloradus, is a chief.
And he's a badass.
And he becomes like the main chief of the Apache when like shit hits the fan and they all have to kind of come together. Dude,
can you imagine a 6'6" Native American chief with like a headdress on? He looks like he's 8 feet tall all the time. That is an imposing figure to walk up.
That is an imposing name, Mangus Coloradus.
It's a badass name.
That's why you're a 6'6" chief.
But think about the balls Geronimo had to have on him to be able to walk up to that guy and ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. Just seems so, just an incredibly big gesture to try to make to such an important, scary looking man, I'm sure. But yeah, he's a member of the Chiricahua. And he actually brings his mother along. That's kind of part of the respect that they had for elders. She lived with the Chiricahua. She lived right next to them, and I think they had like huts. I forgot the exact terminology for what their living spaces were, but having 3 kids pretty quickly, shocking. Thinking about probably what the birth rates were back then for Native Americans. Like, they didn't have a hospital to go to. They were just birthing children in these villages. They had medicine men. They probably had some sort of like a crude midwife. And then you just got to hope that everything works out well.
I mean, yeah. And keep in mind that this is a time when they haven't really been, and this will come into play, of course, because it always fucking does. This isn't a time when they're being introduced with a bunch of like strange and foreign diseases.
Yeah.
So yes, it probably is a point that survivability once a child gets to a certain age, probably not too great, but
to have 3 kids though, that's probably a pretty big accomplishment, especially as fast as they did. And this is where we sort of see a turn happen. So March 5th, 1851, we're talking, he was born in 1829, 51, so he's what, 22?
21 or 22, I think.
Yeah, so he's had 3 kids in the 5 years that him and Alope have been married.
He's getting busy.
They actually post up outside of the village called Llanos, and they are just there to do trade. They had an agreement. They had a treaty with this Mexican village to be able to come in and trade goods. Part of it, I believe, was probably like we're going to pay you so you don't come in and raid us type situation.
Like a tribute type thing?
Yeah, like maybe if we're cool with them and we're non-aggressive with them, they won't come back and steal shit. If we can give them enough now, they won't come back later. So they didn't bring any weapons. They didn't bring anything like that. They brought their women and children along with them. The women and children stayed back at camp with just a couple different males there to kind of...
I think we may need to make an amendment. I'm not sure Alope was the chief's daughter. It might have been one of his forthcoming wives. Because
okay, so Mangus wasn't
I
her
might have got
father's,
ahead of
like,
myself
stepfather?
because I remembered that was still a very like crazy thing about him. So we'll hold on that while we're going through this. I'm also looking up the information as well.
Okay. But they go into the village to do some trading. They don't bring weapons or anything like that. All that's left back at camp with the women and children. And while they're gone, there is a company of 400 Sonoran soldiers that they believe may have tracked them to where they were because of a previous raid that they had done on the Sonoran people. These 400 Sonoran soldiers just come through and go scorched earth on their little encampment that they have. They kill, if not all the women and children, a good portion of the women and children. They take some of them back as prisoners, but a few of them can escape. When Geronimo and everybody are coming back from the village, they see a few of these women milling around. They're like, "Hey, why are you outside camp? What's going on?" Like,
They were like running from the camp.
yeah, they said that the military showed up and completely wiped everybody out. They actually had to stay away from the camp for a couple days.
Yeah, they had
were
to
concerned of that surprise attack.
Yep. Because if they were coming back in, they didn't want to catch them like on the way out or something like that. And so
And they didn't have any weapons because they were going on a peaceful mission to go trade.
yeah, so they split up and all like took like different routes to it. And they were able to, I think, either sneak in or take out some scouts that were still looking out for them and basically go to fucking take stock of the
losses.
Yeah.
And Geronimo comes back. He finds Alope. He finds his mother. And he finds his 3 kids have all succumbed to the military's will. And it basically sends him into just a spiral. He is so depressed. Part of what the tradition is when you lose a spouse or anything like that.
Like, I can't even, like, this is the linchpin moment in this whole thing where, like, it can be prior to Geronimo. This just sounds like kind of frontier life to me. Like, it's brutal, it's savage and everything like that. Like, I get the Apache, I get their point of view definitely because their land is being encroached on. So that's where I find myself siding. But then to be in a situation where I know he's gone out and raided and he's done similar things to families and he's had war parties and things like that. But because this is essentially something that happens where probably the Mexicans shouldn't be at all to begin with. I'm not saying one excuses the other.
Yeah.
But like to go and to find like your kids, your wife, and scalped as well. Because they had to get they wanted.
Well, yeah, they were getting their money's worth.
Yeah, to find that I want to say they said he didn't talk for 2 days. He says he doesn't speak for 2 days and everything. Like he gathered their possessions. Did he burn them? Or
yep, part of tradition was to burn like their huts basically. So he burned his hut, him and Alope's hut. He burned his mother's hut. And then he actually went through and burned all of his children's possessions because he just couldn't handle seeing anything. Mm-hmm. He just basically wanted to burn everything that was a memory of them. Then he was pissed. Then he got really, really, really mad.
As one fucking would.
Yeah.
This is literally like, it's that scene off of John Wick.
Yeah.
He's just like, fuck this shit.
So he shows up to the chief's area, Magnus Coloradus, and he tells him, we got to do something about this. We got to strike back. We have to make sure that we get them for exactly what they did to us.
So sorry to interrupt again. So I know Cochise, who's going to come in here in a bit. Awesome name, by the way. He married the daughter of Magnus Coloradus.
Cochise married Magnus's daughter.
And now I'm trying to find out because I know that Cochise and I'm trying to remember when Cochise and Geronimo established their relationship, how that is tied in.
Okay.
So I'll keep looking that up. Apologize for the inaccurate information. There was someone that married someone else as a chief's daughter, and we just got excited about it.
We don't promise 100%. We'll fix these mistakes as they come. But Magnus tells him, yeah, we're in. Here's the deal, though, is you have to go to Cochise, and you have to see if you can garner his support. He had a friend growing up who I believe probably took over as chief of his old tribe, I think is who it was. His name was Who? And he had just a really bad stutter. Mm-hmm. So he worked almost twice as hard and became like the warrior's warrior. Like he was just a certified badass all the way around. To the point to where when he was out leading war raids, he actually came up with like early hand symbols so he wouldn't waste time if he was stuttering on the field trying to get his point across. So like the Navy SEAL signs and all that shit that you hear people talking about, he was kind of like the early inventor of being able to use sign language out on the battlefield to convey what he needed done.
That's nuts.
And him and Geronimo were friends growing up. So he shows up to Cochise. He says, "Hey, these people killed all of our wives that were on this party going to trade. They killed all of our children. Anybody that we loved that was in that camp is now gone. We need revenge on these people." Cochise kind of goes, "Okay, I'll take it under advisement. I'll talk to my people. We'll see if we're in, and I'll let you know." He goes and he talks to Who's band, and Who, being an old friend, says, "Yeah, I'll run it by everybody, but you have our support too." Ends up finding out that Cochise is cool with the whole plan. So they basically send in 3 bands of warriors, which I assume was probably a pretty large force. And
Well, I'm fucking desert ninjas.
yeah,
Desert Special Forces ninjas.
so they show up to this little Sonoran village, and in what I was listening to, they said that it was like the old Sonoran capital, but it was kind of like the most out there city that they could come to where like support and being close to other villages wasn't that close. And they just camped outside the city. And eventually there were 4 guys that came out from the city to try to find their intentions out. And they came in.
Oh, so they made their presence known.
Yeah.
Okay.
They came into the encampment. They asked them what was going on. They just killed all 4 of them. So eventually, once those 4 guys don't come back into the village and report, everybody gets a little bit concerned about what's going on. But at the same time,
Has
they
anyone
knew.
seen Martin and the other 3 guys?
Yeah, they
They didn't come back yet?
No. They didn't bring any scalps back. They didn't bring back any
You
information.
think they're probably just hanging out over there, right? They're just
having
like,
fun.
yeah.
I'm sure it was cool. But they had chosen the Sonoran village kind of with the thought process of they'll go in, they'll make their presence known, they'll kill people within the village, but the military is going to be far enough away that they can almost draw them in when somebody comes and reports to them that there's a raid going on this village. So they're just setting a trap basically to try to bring the army to them instead of trying to take the fight to their home turf. Eventually the military shows up and the shit just, there was so many losses on both sides. That was sort of
Again, like these are going to be Wild West numbers. So when we say losses, proportionate losses, it might have been a total of 25 warriors, but that's still a lot of warriors to get together and go in for an attack. And it could have been, 40 soldiers or something, but it's still one of these things where, like it's the Alamo, where like the defender, you assume there was a ton of defenders of the Alamo, and like the numbers weren't that large.
No, but still, if you're looking at it percentage wise, if you're losing 10 to 12% of your force, it's a big loss. But one of the things that held Geronimo back from being sort of looked at in the chiefdom way was part of the reason these people became chiefs and were able to hold themselves up in pretty high esteem was because when they would go out on these war raids or they would go to war or anything like that, they were able to minimize their losses just based on their strategy. Young Geronimo leading the charge in this did not have the strategy. He was losing a lot of native lives along with trying to take a lot of Mexican lives.
Well, they said too that it was during this war with Mexico when this starts, that this is where he actually gets the name. He doesn't have the name Geronimo up to this point. He's still known as Goyale, or I'm sorry for mispronouncing that. That's still essentially his given name. And so the term, there's some speculation about how the term Geronimo, I have ones that sound a little more plausible and everything, but there is a Saint Jerome, I guess is like, I don't know what patron saint, but they would call out for Saint Jerome. And as he's literally killing like these Mexican troops, I don't know if it's like Jerome, no, like the sounds that they're like, as he goes to stab them or something like that. But that's kind of the one that has a tie to it and more plausible. And then he is,
Well, yeah, then there's the other logical one that they couldn't pronounce his name, so it just came out as Geronimo.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe the way we're pronouncing, because we've heard people pronounce his name.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, the way he's saying that should be the same phonetically as we're saying it. So I don't know where that would come. I just like the fact that they're calling out and he's
the
murdered so
patron
many
saint of
and
safety.
he's murdered so many of
Yeah.
these fucking guys in revenge that they fucking come up. That's his name now is like Geronimo.
Yeah, just a crazy way to come upon it. Whether it was basically what someone was screaming as they were being murdered by this guy. Like it was sort of his calling card almost. It felt like to be screamed his own name, like no, don't kill me, right before he did it. He fought himself all the way through all his ammunition that he had in his rifle. He fought himself all the way down through bows and arrows. He was killing this many people. He fought his way all the way down to just holding his knife. And he was on the field very close to the point of not having any way to protect himself, but there weren't a whole lot of the Mexicans left that he had to get rid of. So it was him and another guy on the battlefield. There were 3 members of the Mexican military left. And basically Geronimo did what his training told him to and ran back for safety, ran back for cover. And as he was running back, these bullets were just whizzing by him, somehow not hitting him, somehow not clipping him, not taking him down.
They said that when these guys, because they were used to, they had to adapt to gunfire and everything. They said that when these guys were running, it was not like how you would like the way you would see like Custer's Last Stand, like a cavalry or like troops running away, where it's like, I want to get from this point to this point as quickly as possible. I'm going to run in a straight line, but it makes me real easy to shoot in the back. They said these guys ran like fucking jackrabbits.
Serpentine pattern.
And it was like just bouncing back and forth, and they would be down and they'd be low, and like they couldn't get a fucking shot off, especially shooting with like not like a musket, but like a black powder rifle or like early rifles. There's no way they're accurate. And so just these guys' tactics for even getting out of the shit was advanced.
It was legendary. So he ends up running to a spot where there were a few more of his native brothers back, draws these 3 Mexican military members into the fray. He ends up getting a spear from one of his guys. They end up shooting the guy that he was running back with, and he attacks 2 of them with the spears, kills 2 of them, and it's just him and one last Mexican soldier. And he pulls out his knife and he finishes him that way. Just the most personable way that you could kill somebody, with a knife standing over the top of them. And somehow that wasn't, I don't know. I guess maybe not being in that situation, I can't say somehow, because that probably wouldn't satiate the feeling of losing 3 children, your wife and your mother, all to maybe not the same guy. But
you're just looking to fucking put that pain onto somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that could really be it.
And at that point, too, how much, when you've lost all that, just from a human being standpoint, like, do you really feel the most self-preservation? Like, that mode. I don't think, with him, of course, he's trying to take revenge on all these guys, but I think you're fighting with, not a death wish, but fighting without the concern of living.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. You're fighting to try to fill a hole. You're not fighting to win the fight.
Yeah.
But after that, he had a lot of, I wouldn't call them misses after that, but he had a lot of raids that kind of went sideways.
When did he make the proclamation about no bullet will ever touch me?
I don't quite remember.
That is something that he did, right?
Oh, yeah. He basically said that he felt like God was going to protect him. He wasn't going to see him fall on a battlefield. He wasn't going to be killed. No bullet can ever kill me. Hopefully he said kill, because he ended up getting shot more than one time.
He may have amended it.
Yeah.
Did I say hit? I meant kill.
Yeah. No, not kill. I did get hit a couple times, but yeah, just some of these other raids that he was never really able to talk a lot more warriors into following him into battle after what happened at this first big kind of bloody melee.
That's one thing too, that, when they're bringing up points of the people, from his tribe that gets moved into the reservations, and they're like, their gripe is like, part of it's like, some of them are like, please stop doing this, because like we're afraid they're going to take it out on us.
Yeah, we're getting a bad name because of what you're doing.
The other part too is like, you're convincing these other men to go with you when you start escaping reservations and stuff like that. you're convincing them, and then they're going with you. And your tactics, although you're winning or you're doing what needs to be done, you're losing guys.
Collateral damage
Yeah,
is sort of your style.
Yeah.
He's like a beat cop that plays it fast and loose. Mm-hmm. But he had
a real Martin Riggs character.
Yeah. He takes, I think it was like 10 natives or 10 warriors in on a raid. And it was one of the first times after this big kind of melee that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's now at war with Mexico. So this is like,
Yeah.
okay, so what we're going to talk about now, it's not going to go battle to battle because Apache raids, Mexican ambushes, all that. Basically, they're innumerable, and the documentation of them just isn't there.
Yeah.
So at this point, we're going to be again touching over bases. This is essentially, so much is provided to this because this is right after this happens, and what kicks off this Apache Mexican War.
Well, and we're going to be kind of jumping back and forth in time frames too, because there's the war that they're fighting against the Mexicans, and then the war that they're fighting against the U.S. Army. Mm-hmm. But one of the first raids that he leads out after that, he is leading a raid, and first thing you hear is the shot of a rifle, and Geronimo takes one right under the left eye. So he gets hit kind of right on the cheekbone. I guess it's just a graze, but it was enough that he lost sight in that eye. Mm-hmm. So immediately the first volley that's fired ends up hitting him in the eye, and so the guy that's leading the raid is essentially out of the fight at that point. They end up scoring 1 or 2 deaths. On the Mexican side, they, I believe, lose 1 man. They pull back. They consider it successful. He comes back, is having a harder time trying to get some more warriors to follow him into battle.
And again, these battles aren't like what you're thinking of, like standing,
skirmishes.
Line up across from each other.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's literally hiding behind rocks like you see in Western, and they're just like popping up and firing, and so it's...
Well, at this point, cattle, horses, anything like that were currency. So these raids weren't always to kill, but usually the killing would happen during the swiping.
As soon as someone was like, hey, don't do that, it's like, you're dead.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Or you're not running the other direction and you don't look like you have anything on you.
There was another one that he led a little bit later on that he actually takes probably one of the worst things that happened to him. But they were in a skirmish. There was a lot of blood that was shed. He had a Mexican military guy basically cornered. He went to sprint at him to hit him with his spear, slips in a pool of blood, falls in front of the Mexican soldier. The Mexican soldier stands up and basically sledgehammers the butt of his rifle on top of Geronimo's head and just knocks him senseless. Just one straight shot.
This is
on
all
the
from
head.
his biography, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like an axe shot to his head. Drops him. As he's looking up, this guy's getting ready to finish him off and kill Geronimo. Well, one of the other warriors comes up and clips the guy in the neck and kills him before Geronimo can be dispatched by this guy. But the fact that he was running up, this skilled, trained soldier, and it just turns into a slapstick routine where he slips in a pool of blood and falls and takes a shot to the head.
I can't even imagine close quarters. Shit like that where like you literally like that's like as like a Mexican soldier, yeah, you probably have like a sword, like think of like how Spanish and stuff like that. That's not what you're ever hoping to have to do. You're like, this gun's gonna keep anything away. It's fucking gun.
Yeah.
You get into that situation where like you're now against somebody who this is their thing, is coming to you like this, and like just trying to think of like the mindset of being like, oh fuck. And then knowing you're almost about ready to get out of it, and then you get fucking killed.
Well, yeah, when you go to start using the butt of your rifle as a sledgehammer, your rifle has ceased its first duty to shoot. And then you also had a saber on you, but you had to draw it and know how to use it. So in order to kill him, drawing the saber gave just enough time for another warrior to come and wipe you out. They said over all of his battles, he was wounded at least 8 times. I think they said that he had been shot in the forearm, in the thigh. He had taken 1 in the stomach and then 1 in the eye. He had been stabbed by sabers multiple times. There was the gun butt that knocked him silly. So it wasn't like he wasn't taking damage in some of these skirmishes.
Like, how is none of this ever getting infected?
Yeah.
Or any of this
He's
shit?
a medicine man, I guess. I guess
yeah.
you just know the antiseptic plants to put in these
But can you
cuts.
imagine, like, also from people looking at this and like warriors that have gone into battle with him, they're like we've seen him stabbed and shot, and like yet he's still here.
He just keeps coming.
Yes, it's like the fucking Terminator.
And it has to be the most demoralizing thing ever to think that this one guy has such an axe to grind that he keeps showing up at these raids and taking your shit, and you keep hitting him and you keep clipping him, but you just can't finish him off. There was another battle that this comes before this just terrible bullshit. Basically, when they get screwed at Casas Grandes, but he is just far enough away from this Mexican general that he's hearing him talk to his commanders, and he's telling them basically, it doesn't matter what the Apache do, we're going to push through and we're going to kill Geronimo where he stands. No matter what happens, even if we lose this fight, we need to kill Geronimo. And he's sitting there talking between these two guys, this Mexican general is, he hears it, he pops up out of the gully that he was standing in. Geronimo fires one shot, hits him in the head, kills him, and immediately, as soon as they see the general drop, everybody looks where the shot comes from and raises their rifles and fires right at the gully that Geronimo is laying in. Doesn't get hit by one bullet. Somehow there's just some sort of way that he's able to evade.
He's got this fucking like aura.
Yeah, it's like he's got armor on or something. He still, I guess, gets wounded, so it's not armor. But there's so many different times when he escapes these situations where he's outnumbered, just being able to either be smart enough to get away, or there's just some divine right that he has to not get killed.
Well, also around this time or before it, there is a little skirmish called the Mexican-American War. And at the result of that, the result of the United States winning that, or I don't know what the settlement was on that. We're going to have to actually research.
The United States won, and that's where they got this extra land where we got New Mexico. And
okay, now we're
that.
stretching out to what like the continental United States kind of looks like now, more toward Mexico. Okay, so now this is our land apparently, and as far as the U.S. goes. So they start to essentially say, hey, now that we have all this land, what do we do? Everyone head fucking west. So now you get this influx of the United States military, settlers and everything like that now coming from the east.
Land surveyors that are going out to try and find what natural resources are in these areas.
So now you have them running into conflict with the Apache coming in to take this land. And at this point too, they're not making any distinction. It was just either the Mexican people or now it's the fucking pale faces, the white eyes.
Yeah, white eyes.
So now you have these, coming into Apache land and everything, and they're like, more people, they look different, they might, act different or have different stuff, but we're just going to do the same shit and keep these people off our fucking land. So they're coming into conflict with essentially settlers in the U.S. military or the U.S. Army at that point. And
they were pretty cool with the first ones, though, surprisingly. The surveyors that came down and looked at the land, in Geronimo's autobiography.
What are you guys doing here? We're just looking around. What are you guys looking around for? No reason, actually. Now that I look at this land, this is your land? All right, I'm just going to go back and I'll report that this is your land. So can't report it if you kill me.
He was talking about how they would come in, these surveyors would trade different things from them. And I don't know if they had a translator or maybe the surveyors spoke Spanish because the Apache would learn Spanish coming into contact with them so much. Mm-hmm. But somehow one of these surveyors paid them money. And just imagine trying to explain what money is to a band of Native Americans that has no understanding of currency or anything like that, like in forms of things that aren't usable goods. So he ends up convincing these Native Americans to take this money back and trade for some of the hides that he wanted to trade with them. And he convinced them that this money was very, very valuable. Well, they had actually taken the money to a neighboring, I believe it was a Navajo tribe that they were cool with that was more towards like Texas. Mm-hmm. And they showed them the money. And those tribes had dealt more with white people and had seen currency and understood like trading posts and shit like that. And they're like, oh, yeah.
I'm guessing they probably, because they did go into trade in some Mexican towns and everything, which led to that.
But American money.
Yeah.
This is something
they
completely
had to understand
different.
the concept of a barter system, that the thing that they're getting didn't have an inherent value to it.
It didn't have like a tangible use.
That's right, yeah.
So yeah, they I guess go over and show this other tribe, and they're like, "Oh yeah, dude, that's really actually very valuable that you have." And so they like cherished the money that they were given. They couldn't do anything with it because they couldn't eat it. They couldn't, spend it anywhere because there was nowhere to spend it.
Mm-hmm.
But they really liked having the currency. Like they held that in high regard because this guy told them that, and because this other tribe of Native Americans was like, "Yeah, dude, that's pretty cool. Like you can go down to Fort Sill over here and buy
Ammo.
10 pounds of butter ammo." Yeah.
Yeah.
So they didn't really have an issue with the pale faces, with the white eyes, until the army came down, and that was really when tensions kind of started to rise. We'll get to them in a little bit. One of the worst things I think that I read about that happened between the Mexicans and the Apache was in 1873. They met in this place called Casas Grandes.
Well, before that, real quick, just to kind of like what's going on the other front, in 62, Magnus Coloradus, kind of going as far as like you're talking about interaction with like the U.S. Army and the settlers and everything, he actually meets with a U.S. official to talk about a peace treaty. So they're trying to at least kind of like alleviate stuff on that front. And before we get into the whole thing, because I want to talk about how they get stabbed in the back here with Magnus before we get into the Casas Grandes.
Yeah, well, and even before Magnus, you have the tensions that start to rise between the American army and these bands of Apache is kind of through our railroad system, because we needed a way to get to Los Angeles and we needed goods to do it. You can go up and around, or you can just cut straight through. Mm-hmm. So cutting straight through their land, if you're going to put in a train station, A, it's going to be on their land, but B, you also need water supply for everybody else that's going to be around there. You're just
bringing more people that are likely, if there's a train station, to stop me like, this looks like a nice place.
Yeah. You're in a very arid climate down there. So as that's being built, you have to have a certain give and take.
Now you're harming the survivability of our people by needing to use one of the most precious resources here.
So we're going to need you guys to trade with us and be cool with us. We're going to need to be friends to be able to share this area.
Okay, gotcha.
And even before that, there was a mining town, and this is kind of Mangus's first big issue with the Americans, was they allowed this Mexican village to be there that was mining, I believe it was silver, and it could have been other precious metals, but I think it was silver. They end up running everybody out, or they end up running all the Mexican people out of this mining town. This ends up getting taken up by an American group that was down there mining these natural resources, or mining these precious metals, and Magnus has kind of had enough of it. He doesn't really want them on their land anymore, so he goes in and he tells them, he's like, "Hey, I know that you guys are kind of working this area. I don't really want to tell you about this other silver deposit that we know of, but it's over in this direction." Not where there was any sort of silver or anything like that. He just wanted them basically off of his land. They end up calling bullshit on it, and they string him up by his ankles upside down in the middle of the town square, and he was there for like a day until somebody found him. And when they found him, they just came through and killed every American that was still in that mining town. So he had already had some pretty bad...
He didn't die, though.
No, he didn't die. They just strung him upside down. He was found. Stringing somebody upside down's a different kind of sick.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just all the blood rushing to your head and everything like that. It's just a real rough situation. So they don't do real well, but they end up deciding to work with these people that are running the railway. They go ahead and show them where their water resource is closest to them. They say, "We're friends. We'll be able to share this as long as anything that's coming in on these trains. If you see something that we need, go ahead and let us have some of it. Mm-hmm. We'll just have a real good trade system."
Rent. It's a system of rent.
So they go, "Okay, perfect." They go ahead and build a fortress around the water supply so the Native Americans can't get in there, because all the white eyes were concerned that the Apaches were going to attack them because they had heard about this savage group of Native Americans that were attacking any white people that were coming through there. And that sort of starts off this kind of anger between the railway workers and the Native Americans, because like, yeah, we showed you where this water supply was for you to be able to
You
let your cattle.
motherfuckers just got here.
Yeah, and now you think you own the place. And you're saying that because you're scared of us. Like, that's kind of a fucked up deal. So, yeah, just like you were talking about, in order to broker this peace between Mangus Coloradus and the army, he goes and tries to talk a peace treaty.
And then in 1863, he's invited to meet with the U.S. military officers at Fort McLean in southwest New Mexico. And basically, this was what is it known as? The Bascom Affair?
No, the Bascom Affair happens with Cochise. We can talk a little bit about that.
Oh, that's right. So when Mangus gets there, he's automatically taken into custody, right?
Yep. He shows up, and it's him and two other warriors that are with him. He comes in under a white flag of peace. Doesn't want any sort of issues or anything like that. They immediately take him into custody, and basically the two scouts that are with him go back to the band that was waiting outside of town to be able to kind of keep an eye on things because there's concern that some bad shit's going to happen. Well, it does. They take him into custody, say that they want to talk to him about murders and different raids that have happened. They start accusing him of things. Overnight, they say that he tried to escape and end up firing multiple rounds into him and killing him, when really there was a kind of like not an independent observer. He wasn't a member of the army, but he was working in Fort McLean, and part of his deal was he was outside watching, and he kept hearing rustling going on in the tent that Mangus was in, and he peeked in, saw the guards weren't really messing with him, didn't really know why he was moving or anything like that, poked his head back out, heard the rustling again, would look back in, and this was his account of what was going on. And then he decided that he had to be a little bit more stealthy about it. So as he takes a step outside, he's still kind of keeping an eye inside. The guards that were watching him were sticking their bayonets into the fire and heating him up, and then sticking him in the legs and the feet underneath his blankets.
Oh, shit.
So they were just torturing him inside as he was still chained to the ground. They said that he got up and tried to escape. Well, when they go back and they look at the trajectory of the bullets are fired directly into the ground, and he's still wrapped up in his blankets. So clearly there was no way.
There's that much evidence on this?
Yeah. Because there was a full-on military investigation into why this tribal chief was killed.
Oh, okay.
So they were trying to figure out who was at fault. Of course, the army doctors all the evidence and finds that nobody was at fault and that he really did try to escape.
I would imagine it's hard to fucking do back then.
Well, yeah, because they just spun a yarn about
yeah.
how he tried this daring escape and they were able to kill him before he left. And that just sent the kind of anger through everybody that was an Apache that had heard about it that knew Mangus, because like you said, he was kind of like the chief of the Apache. Everybody knew him. He was a name that was very important.
This is where I'm kind of keeping him. I got confused early on. So Cochise is the one that now takes over as the chief.
Yeah.
And Cochise and Geronimo are like kind of close and everything. So Cochise is the one that's next up in line and is of course being like, you motherfuckers just completely like, we were trying to have peace talks and everything, so I guess it's war now. So basically continues his raids on U.S. settlements. And then on October 12th, 1872, he finally brokers a peace treaty, which I don't even know how the fuck that goes on, where he's like, you're coming to us this time.
He had just gotten old.
And he was also like, because they're still committing raids on U.S. settlements, the U.S. Army is still engaged with them and fighting them. It's also kind of an attrition thing where like it's a lot harder to replace like people like when you're losing Apache warriors and everything. You have people having kids and everything like that, and you have warriors coming up at the same time where the army is just like, he said, we need more guys. And you're just bringing in these additional troops. He gets to the point where he's like, fuck, like I gotta try to find some way to where I can just keep these tribes intact. He's like, I'm not going to be the one that allows these tribes or, the Apache people to die on my watch and be the chief that, led to my people being extinct. So that's when he brokers this peace treaty and his bands are relocated to what's the newly formed Chiricahua Reservation.
Yeah. And he, like you were alluding to earlier when you said the Bascom affair, he had his own sort of Magnus moment where they noticed coming into the train station that there was a bunch of soldiers. There was like 150 soldiers that were coming through the train station. And that kind of perks your ears up when you know that the military is not super friendly with the natives and you're the closest tribe to this train station. So he goes in.
It's not like he just hanging at the train station. Like, they constantly have scouts and spies, like, looking out for this shit.
So he rolls into town with, I believe it's his brother, rolls into the train station, says, hey, what's going on? He says they were just passing through. They had stopped to get their rations. They're going to be headed out shortly. Not your deal. They're not coming after you. Don't worry about it. He goes, if you're concerned about it, ride up, talk to the general, see what the general says, and kind of go from there. But they're not here for you, so you don't have to worry about it. They ride out with their horses. They run into, I believe he's the second Lieutenant Bascom that is leading this group of soldiers. And they ride up to him. There are, I believe, his wife is there. His child is there. He had a brother, and then I think it was like a brother-in-law that were all there. They meet with Bascom, and they meet inside of his
Basically,
tent.
obviously showing, like, we're not a war party coming in here. Like, I got my, like, wife and kid here. Like, I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah, there's no violence.
Yeah.
They don't bring their kids for raids. So as they sit down inside the tent, they start talking to him and ask him what he's doing there, and Bascom immediately just starts berating him. They say that
he accuses him of that there's been like a raid on a farm, some people killed, and then like a kid that was captured. And it's basically like, you motherfuckers did this. And he's like, no, we didn't. He's like, if you give me like 10 days, I'll go put some feelers out and I'll find out who actually did this and we can get this whole thing. You know, he's trying to keep the peace here. And so he's like, nope, fuck it, you did it. And basically puts Cochise under arrest.
Well, he tries.
Well, he technically does, but then Cochise ends up cutting a hole in the tent and fucking goosing it out the back with his boys.
Which, I guess his brother tried to cut a hole in the tent. Maybe his knife wasn't sharp enough to get through the felt or whatever it was.
I don't know.
But I just, to think about how he would slice his way through the side of the tent and then like jump out and run.
Yeah.
Seems pretty funny.
And as soon as they were,
this isn't a funny situation, but it's pretty funny.
And
just
as soon
to
as
see
they
him.
were out, they were gone. They were back in their element, and they were just going to fucking disappear.
Yeah, so Cochise gets away. They end up capturing everybody else almost.
Yeah, so Cochise and a few other warriors that he was with end up getting away, but basically everyone that he was with, like members of his family and everything, are still there and now are prisoners.
So, what do? You need bargaining chips, right? Mm-hmm. They go and they raid a wagon train and end up capturing a few, I believe it was like two Mexican people. There was one white guy that they had picked up along the way. And as they come back and they show up outside the military installation, they're like, hey, we got these guys. Do you want to trade these guys back for our people?
Well, yeah, it kind of was a stand, because as soon as they got away, Cochise just went and got like his entire, like all of his warriors.
Yep.
Yeah. And so they actually kind of like surrounded, I think, the camp or the fort where they were at. And basically during a standoff, like some other soldiers, American soldiers, were captured. And then a couple more Braves were captured. The Apache actually retreated. They thought they were being like flanked. But basically what they did in revenge is they continued holding the people, for like revenge for continuing to hold Cochise's people, they killed like the soldiers and postmen that they had captured. So then the Americans were like, fine, you fucking kill our people. They in turn killed 6 men that they had captured, although they did allow in this situation like the women and children to go free.
Yeah, not a great resolution to this. One of those people that were killed, I believe they were hung, was Cochise's brother
and
his
nephews.
brother-in-law.
The 3 guys were a brother and 2 nephews.
Oh, nephews, that's what they were. So Cochise not only angered by that and then angered by what happens to Mangus, and after Mangus was killed, they basically sent an army out and killed everybody that was waiting for Mangus to come back. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people were wiped out.
This incident is basically what kicks off the Apache American Wars.
Yeah. And it's such a huge part of sort of the Apache American Wars kind of needs to be its own separate episode, and it'll probably have to be more than that just because there were so many different skirmishes that happened. But sort of what came out of it was they knew, the Americans knew, the government knew that we were going to be moving in that direction, and there had to be a solution because all these roving warriors that are out there, the Apache, there wasn't really an understanding of like different bands. So when something bad would happen,
It was just the Apache.
it was the Apache, yeah.
Yeah.
And they actually had, not to say that these were the guys that were always really stirring the pot, but you would have people that were exiled from these bands. They were sent out, they had done something despicable. Instead of being killed, they were just cast out. Well, eventually, all the natives that were cast out to live by themselves formed like these roaming outlaw bands of banned Native Americans that they didn't want in these tribes because they were doing bad shit, came together and would sort of go out on raids in order to feed themselves. So it wasn't just like the women and children in the actual groupings that were, I guess, official, but there were sort of like outlaw Native Americans.
Well, and the crazy thing about the Apache American War, like you never even think about this, it's the longest active war or standing war that America's ever been in. From start to finish, it took place over the course of like 40 years without
Even the
resolution.
Korean War?
Yep.
I guess the Korean War's still going on, but there was a ceasefire.
Yeah.
There wasn't ever a ceasefire.
Yeah, between the
till-
time it kicked off and the time that it was resolved.
Yeah.
40 years.
The solution, though, in order to manifest this destiny of moving west all the way, was they needed to be able to control these Apache. They probably looked at it as a situation as like, we can go out there and kill some, but our losses are going to be so huge trying to exterminate everybody that if we can just round them up and talk them into being on these reservations, part of the give and take of that is if we put them on these reservations, we're going to have to promise them resources. We're going to have to promise them rations. We're going to have to try to not only satiate them that way, but we also believe that we need to teach them the white way to live, so to speak, as far as we need to get them, we need to get a Bible in their hands. We need to bring Christianity to them. We need to teach them how to farm so they can understand how our culture does things.
And because essentially, we're kind of getting away from Geronimo just a little bit, but we kind of have to explain why he continues to fight because there are these different active war. Like, again, they're still at war with like the Mexicans. They're at war with the Americans. And Geronimo's not following like Cochise all around. Like I said, there's like many, many bands and everything. These are just essentially the leaders or the most famous people within this huge collection of of the Apache. And so you still have Geronimo during this course. He's, not there essentially when the Meacham affair. What was the guy's name?
Bascom.
The Bascom affair, anything. And so
I think he was.
Do you think he was there?
Yeah. I don't know if he was in with everybody else. I think he may have been riding around with Cochise at that time, though.
Oh, okay.
But they end up heading to this Chiricahua reservation. Not a real big fan of it. The guy that kind of talked them into peace and going to this reservation was a guy named General Howard. In his autobiography, Geronimo basically says that Howard was like the one guy that everybody trusted because he was always very honest in his dealings with the Native Americans, and he held a lot of respect. He was able to bring them onto this Chiricahua reservation that wasn't, even though they were the Chiricahua tribe or the band, they did not allow them to go back to where their nomadic lands were. It was basically like a separate reservation off of there.
And it all comes full circle, buddy, because when at the time of the Bascom affair, so Geronimo and the other Bedonkahe, they were living among the Chiricahuas. He had married a Chiricahua Nenda girl named Shiga, who was a close relative to Cochise, and that's where I was getting it confused because Cochise is the chief.
That makes more
sense.
There
we go.
Yeah. For as much as we talked about how much Geronimo loved Alope, he found himself, I believe it was 9 wives, including Alope, over that time. So he wasn't.
Well, over the course of his life, I think it was a total of 9 wives. And that's the thing, too, is they said that within that culture, you supported as many wives as you could, that you were allowed to actually support and like keep alive. So that was actually kind of encouraged because you more wives, more children, you can grow essentially the population and everything like that.
And he was very good at providing, it feels like. To have 9 wives, he must have been pretty good at providing.
All right. Before we get any further, bathroom break.
Okay.
Oh my God, Adam. What is that up in the sky? It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's socials. Oh my God. It's faster than Instagram.
That's historically high pod on Instagram.
More powerful than X?
It's historically high, historically HI on X.
Able to leap tall threads in a single bound.
Back to historically high pod on Threads.
And, I mean, I guess there's still Gmail, right?
We got that too. That is historically high podcast at gmail.com.
All right, guys, back to the show. All right, and we're back. All right, so getting back to Geronimo. So, again, kind of just what we talked about in October of 1872. That was when Cochise actually brokers the peace treaty. He and his band are relocated to the Chiricahua Reservation. So at this point, Geronimo is not on the reservation. I don't believe he goes with him.
No, he stays out with some of the Chiricahua. There's a lot of division, excuse me, that come around these reservation times. And so much of it is there's a promise of a life on a reservation that is just much simpler. And Cochise, getting older, knew that he couldn't keep up this lifestyle of attacking and running. I
think he saw the writing on the walls that if they continued, he was running too much of a risk of essentially losing the entirety of the people.
Well, and just his own life too.
Yeah.
He can't be in charge so much anymore because he has gotten older.
Yeah, and I'm not justifying that the reservation system should have even had to have been a thing.
No.
What I'm saying is he's looking at it and saying, like, what gives my people the best chance for survival? And that's why it's not like, he's not like, oh, yay, we're moving to the reservation. He, like, begrudgingly has to, like, to fulfill his part of the peace treaty to fulfill that.
Well, and there were other people that went with him. There were other Chiricahua that decided the reservation was the place to be. Then there was Geronimo that didn't want to be tied down.
Yeah, it's not just like, in these skirmishes, it's the warriors, but at the same time, these warriors that are dying, when they're dying, there's no one really to then help watch after the family. Then it falls on the rest of the tribe to kind of try to help and, figure that kind of stuff out. So Cochise is also looking at this and being like, there's women and children that I have to look after.
Well, and the promises are good. The promises are you move to the reservation. We'll give you an area on the reservation. We will give you resources. We'll give you rations. We'll give you beef. We'll give you everything
they
that
tried.
You need to survive.
They told them, they're like, well, we want you to farm the land. And they're like, well, we're not farmers, but what I think we can do is we're good at like taking care of like animals. So like give us cattle. We'll raise cattle and everything like that. They were like, no.
The promises were always there of what they could provide.
Mm-hmm.
There becomes, excuse me, sort of a greed that comes over, just kind of like everything in life. And we'll get to that shortly. But yeah, Cochise on the reservation, some of the Chiricahua on the reservation, Geronimo still out there.
Not on the reservation.
No, he's
off the reservation.
Yeah.
So
they're down there in Mexico. They think at that point they're safe because if the Americans are attacking them, they can just go across the border. That way the Americans can't get to them, but then they have to deal with the Mexican military that's also, they were a friend in no land.
So eventually it comes to a point where they agree to meet the Mexicans and the Apache to sign a peace treaty at Casa Grandes. And basically after reaching the agreement, the Mexicans are like, hey, let's celebrate. Everyone have some mezcal. And basically got all of them drunk and then attacked them. It's the fucking Red Wedding from Game of Thrones. Like, you invite someone in, you give them, like, you're breaking bread and salt and doing all that kind of stuff. You're making peace, you're having drinks. Get them drunk, and then they end up killing 20 Apache and taking the others who could retreat into custody.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the old strategies that just worked so well in the Wild West for so long. I've pretty much come to the conclusion after a lot of the episodes that we've done, as far as World War II goes, as far as damn near any ancient civilization, treaties just don't mean anything. A treaty is just a word that you put on. Basically, it's like a pre-lie. That's all a treaty feels like to me. Like, nobody ever listens on treaties.
Well, and at this point too, like you don't have again, Geronimo is not the chief, so he's not making decisions, but he is influential. And at this point now, being an influential person, if he didn't like Mexicans at this point because of previous shit, now that they've gone back on this peace treaty, that just solidifies his lifelong hatred.
Yeah, it just basically, what would you say, reaffirms his hatred for Mexicans because these things just keep happening. But basically, as soon as you get close to having any sort of a peace treaty, you end up getting double crossed. The double cross was big back in those days, I feel like. That was sort of...
There was nothing to hold anybody accountable.
Yeah, but like I say, even in World War II, Hitler had a bunch of treaties.
Yeah.
We didn't really hold him accountable.
That's true.
Like a treaty is just like we'll deal with this later. And unfortunately for them, this peace treaty, they were dealt with pretty much immediately.
Well, and at this point too, conditions like we were talking about with the reservation, after that happens in 73, I do believe that Geronimo finds his way to the reservation and basically comes into a situation where there's none of these promises are being kept. So there's not even the illusion that like the stuff is on its way. Like there's been enough time where he comes in and there's like food shortages. They're not in a great environment to really grow anything or do anything like that. They're not in an environment that is as nice as where they were with like trees and water source and everything. And so basically this decision happens. They're like, okay, we'll move you to this San Carlos reservation. And this was even fucking worse, wasn't it?
San Carlos, one of the biggest issues with San Carlos was these Apache tribes that were on there already. A lot of Apache tribes got along. Mm-hmm. Then there were some other bands within the Apache that tended to not get along well with others. Well, when you put all those, when you don't understand basically like the politics between these bands and you put them all on the same reservation, you're putting people who have bad blood with other bands on the same reservation within striking distance. And you're also giving them common places to where they can go eat and do things and shop to where they're going to run into each other. Eventually you're going to get drunken arguments. You're going to get fights. It's just not going to be a good place to be.
So Geronimo's like, no, I'm going to fucking pass on that. So he decides against the move. And when we say breakout, some of these we'll get to it a little bit later, but the places that they get sent later are like actual like forts,
prisons,
and like prisons and everything. But like at this point, the reservations are just like open areas. You do have to like make sure you're kind of being kept track of, and reporting is like people need you to.
Yeah, there's demarcated areas where you can be, but there's no fence.
Yeah. So he's like, nah. So he leaves with about 2/3 of the Chiricahua, and they escape over to the Ojo Caliente reservation.
This place sounds nice.
So there are multiple reservations being set up, but basically what they're doing is they're just trying to pen in, the Apache by opening these other reservations. So they're not all one centrally located place. So they head over there.
And they run into a long-lost friend of Geronimo's, Chief Victorio. He led the Warm Springs Band, and Geronimo actually says in his autobiography that the time that they spent with the Warm Springs and Ojo Caliente was some of the best times of his life. Because it was such a great reservation. They had plenty of food. They had plenty of water. They were able to eat off the land, and they were still getting rations. I think the rations were actually working better on the Ojo Caliente reservation. One of the worst things that was happening at San Carlos, I believe is that, San Carlos, was they had figured out, much like we run prisons now here in America, if you're in a state or federal prison, you have a tax number basically tied to your head. And so you get a certain amount of money for the government for every prisoner that you hold. And that's just basically so you can feed them, so you can kind of get their cost of living basically is paid to them.
Does that fall under the guise of like a reservation as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they were being treated the same way. But the thing is you get a certain bunch of money allocated per person.
You're going to try to cram in as many people.
And then every time or every dollar you don't spend on them is just profit that you get to keep. So as these rations are coming in, they're doing shit like setting the scales that they're weighing out the beef and the flour for the Native Americans funky. So
If
they're
they even
shorting
have to
them.
do that, they're basically just shorting the rations.
Yeah, they're shorting the rations, but then they're taking everything that they're shorting and then selling to villages and towns that are like American villages and towns that have popped up. So they're making money off of the shit that they're bringing in. So the less that they give the Native Americans, the more money they can make themselves. So this isn't necessarily all about profiting or making sure the Apaches are in one area. It's about everybody that's watching them trying to profit off of the Native Americans. So, Os Calientes was great. The reservation was really, really awesome. Unfortunately, when the escape happened, they were pretty angry that San Carlos Reservation wasn't attended by Geronimo and his people. They come calling. They find him, I'm sure, through telegraphs or whatever they used to be on this other reservation with the warm springs.
Yeah, because if another, if 2/3 of the Chiricahuas show up, whoever is managing, if there is someone looking after that reservation or anything, is going to be like, we just had a whole bunch of people show up. Like, we don't.
Weren't you guys assigned somewhere else?
Yeah.
So Chief Victorio and Geronimo are captured. They are brought. I don't think it was on their reservation. I believe they were brought back to San Carlos. Talk to Chief Victorio. They find out that he really wasn't involved in getting Geronimo to come with him. So they let him go. They imprison Geronimo in a tent in chains for 2 months as punishment for leaving. While he's in there, they close the Ojo Caliente reservation.
So there was a huge punishment.
Yeah, the Warm Springs band is kicked off of their reservation.
We're not even going to now give anyone that has a gripe where we're telling them to go. If there's options of places for them to go, we're just going to remove those options.
Yeah, and they were told, tough shit, you're headed to San Carlos. You're headed to this reservation that the Chiricahua didn't want to go to. Oh, and the Chiricahua are also headed back to that same reservation. So the place he had tried to escape, break out of, didn't have to be in San Carlos. They find themselves right back into it. That is, if they decided to go.
So Victorio basically takes the Warm Springs band, and they end up not going to...
Nope. Yeah.
Or they end up not going to San Carlos. They're like, we're going to take our chances. They end up going off into Mexico. And because, again... peace treaty doesn't go through in 73 because the fucking Mexicans end up getting them drunk and killing them. So it's still hostile there. They end up killed off by Mexican soldiers.
Yeah. So that's your risk. That's the thing that you have to take on is if you don't go to this shitty reservation, your life becomes... You don't
have the protection.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying. They're basically saying, hey, you're going here for us to protect you. And if you're not going to let us protect you, then fuck it.
Good luck. See how it goes. We're going to chase you. If you think you're tricky and you can get back down into Mexico, guess what? Those really aren't your people either, and they're going to attack you too. So you're just left to trying to protect yourself out there. If you don't, then you have to come back here and live under our thumb, take our shitty rations. We're going to try to make you into Christian Americans. Like, you're either giving up your lifestyle and the way that you enjoy life, or you're giving up protection.
So in September of 1881, Geronimo was basically told by guards at San Carlos that the army was coming to murder women and children while arresting the leaders, kind of snuff out pretty much everything. And so he's like, nope, fuck that. So he ends up breaking out and escaping to Mexico. And he doesn't, it's not like whenever he breaks out again, he's not the chief or anything like that. But when he breaks out, he's taking warriors and women and children with him that don't want to be in this situation that are also leaving. Again, he's still an inspirational figure to these people. He still has people following him. So it's not like he's just going out there by himself. And
they have such weird, beyond the guard telling him kind of what the army was thinking about doing, there was an old medicine man that lived on the reservation with them there. And he had believed that through a vision he had seen, he was basically told that there was a special dance that they could do that would then help all of the U.S. soldiers and Americans that were occupying their land leave, and that all of their chiefs that had died, so I'm assuming this was Cochise and Colorados and just everybody that they had lost, was going to come back from the dead and that they were going to rule over the land in peace. The guards heard about this and they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And ended up trying to investigate and figure out what was going on. Well, all of the Native Americans that believed in this medicine man and knew what he was saying was something that they thought was going to come to pass just said, okay, we'll deal with this now. Eventually you guys are going to leave and we'll be good. They weren't combative, anything like that. They sent down for the medicine man to come to the main office, which was, I think, in a different part of the reservation. Said, hey, come back to the Apache headquarters. We need to talk to you. The first time he says no. Like, well, this request wasn't really a request. We were just letting you know to come with us to go. They come back the second time. He's like, yeah, I'll go. I didn't go last time because I had somebody that was very sick and they were under my care, and I had to make sure that I was here to make sure that they were going to be alive. They're fine now. I'll go with you. And the guard's like, oh, that doesn't really seem right. The rest of the Apache are kind of standing around his hut, wherever he's living, his domicile, and listening in and kind of listening close because they don't trust the guards at this point. They know that the guards are pretty much bad news, and when they show up to try to take this healer that has told them basically...
Like a prominent figure, like a sage elder.
That their future was something that he was basically foretelling the
Someone
future
giving
of
them
all these
hope,
people go.
basically, yeah.
So they agree. I'll go with you in the morning. There was a band of Apache soldiers, warriors, that were going to follow them and kind of keep an eye on things because they didn't really trust that the medicine man was coming back.
You shouldn't have a problem with us coming along. We're not going to cause any... We just want to make sure everything's on the up and up.
Yeah. There was a situation where the soldiers had slowed down on their way back to the Apache headquarters, whatever they want to call it. And the warriors that were following got too close. And they ended up being seen that they were following them around.
They were doing it secretly.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Soldiers got scared of an ambush, and allegedly there was a first shot that was fired from the soldiers back towards the warriors. The medicine man ends up getting killed. The Apaches move in to try to save him after the shots already ring out. And they beat a lot of them up. They don't really kill a lot of them. And some of the guards that survived it were like, there's no way we should have survived this. They took it easy on us.
Yeah.
Like they weren't trying to kill us.
Yeah.
They were just trying to save their guy.
Yeah.
So that sort of pisses off everyone on the reservation. They know that they have to leave because they just saw their sage medicine man get shot and killed.
And it's not it's 100% not an isolated incident. There's stuff like this going on the entire time of like unfair treatment. They know that they're not receiving as much food as they should. So it's just a fucking litany of stuff. Well, while Geronimo's out, he's basically going back to what they were doing to survive. He's raiding in Mexico and the United States, stealing livestock, guns, kind of, trying to build their strength back up.
Interestingly enough, the reason why they were headed back into the U.S., they weren't stealing livestock in the U.S., they were stealing ammo in the U.S. Why would you have to steal ammo in the U.S.?
Because it doesn't fit your rifles, the stuff in Mexico?
Yeah.
Okay.
So since when they were doing these breakouts, they would go through and steal another band that was on the reservation's horses. They would go through and try to steal guns and rifles and ammunition from the guards. They were all U.S. military guards. So the only way that you were going to have ammunition that would fit your guns would be U.S. ammo to go in your U.S. guns. You didn't... have that luxury of having these Mexican rifles that could fit their cartridges. So you were focusing on livestock and stealing everything from them that you could get, while also needing to go back to America and get provisions to help steal the shit down in Mexico. Like just an odd thing that they had to kind of straddle the border.
So in 83, Mexico is finally like, okay, U.S. Army, you guys want to step in here and try to help us out, and basically allow them into Mexican territory to chase down Geronimo. Now, at this point, this guy that's kind of leading the charge and trying to capture Geronimo is this guy named General Crook. And I can't remember what his relation to Custer. What do you remember this?
Does he sound familiar? Because we talked about him on Little Bighorn.
Was he Captain Crook?
He was Captain Crook.
Oh, was he really back then?
I don't think he was Captain. He might have been.
Okay, so how does he relate? Because I can't remember.
He was the one that was leading the army that had the Battle of Rosebud with Little Bighorn.
Okay.
And that was actually the only war or the only like skirmish that he had ever lost against Native Americans.
Okay, but enough that the guy survived. It wasn't like a last stand like it was with Custer. Okay.
So since he wasn't able to link back up with Custer and reinforce him after Custer got caught up in his area, that was why Custer died, because Crook couldn't bring everybody for reinforcements to protect Custer.
I'm not going to hold that against him.
No, and that actually happens. This is such a weird deal because he shows up in this story. Then he leaves for, I think it was 7 or 8 years. And within that 7 or 8 years, Little Bighorn happens. He's a part of that. And then since he did so well the first time with the Apache, they actually bring him back again.
And the thing, too, is they said he was one of the people that, like, just viewed them as people. And that, deserved, humane treatment and stuff like that. So he had a different idea of, like, chasing down Geronimo, like, shoot to kill. He's like, no, I'm going to go to try to get this guy back, stop what he's doing, get the people he's bringing coming back so we can just kind of put an end to this. And so he's actually able to locate. Was he working with other Apache scouts? Did he have other Apache?
Yep.
Okay. So he used other Apache within, ones that had been on the reservation or ones that he had chosen to work with that were able to then track Geronimo's band of Apache and kind of know the tricks.
White Mountain Apache, the ones that worked with them as scouts.
But still able to be able to track.
It was just a different band of Apache.
And they knew the areas because they'd all kind of been nomadic and traveled around. So he's actually able to find Geronimo and basically gets him to surrender.
This is quite possibly some of the dumbest shit that I've ever heard of in my entire life. I don't know how it worked. So they had actually located Geronimo. They didn't want to go in immediately and attack and cause a big kerfuffle because
they were looking to avoid violence.
A lot of lives lost. So Cook's
again, there's women and children with Geronimo and everything. There's families. Yeah.
So Cook's like, hey, you guys hang out here. I have the urge to go hunt. Takes his shotgun out. They're like, you're going alone? He's like, yeah, I'll be back in a little while. Don't worry. Never mind that we're in eyesight of these native Apache or these Apaches that we think are all killers.
Not
I'm going to go off by myself.
They knew where they were.
Oh, they both knew where each other. They were aware that they were in the same area. So Crook takes off with his shotgun, goes and kills a couple birds. On his way back to his camp, who appears right in front of him but Geronimo? And
doesn't he wander into Geronimo's camp?
No. Geronimo came out and found him as he was hunting.
Okay.
So he comes out and finds him, and it's him and Geronimo, and then all these warriors standing around him. And he said that he felt okay because none of them had held up a weapon or anything like that. It was just sort of like strength in numbers to make sure that nothing bad was going to happen. And Crook's like, look, man, you got to come back with me. And Geronimo goes, well, we don't want to go back to San Carlos. He's like, I'll make you a deal. We'll set some stuff in place. We'll make sure that you guys are taken care of. We actually have this new area that you guys can occupy. It's called Turkey Creek. I believe it was called Turkey Creek. Yeah, Turkey Creek. It's going to be a little bit more conducive. We'll let you kind of pick out the area that you want to be in. So come on back. We'll make sure that you guys get this area. And Geronimo goes, okay, I'll talk it over with my people. We're going to send some people back with you, but I need time to be able to get all the people that are in this, the Sierra Madres, the mountains. I have to collect all my people and then come back.
Yeah.
So he says, cool, that works. Him and Crook shake on it. There's this big issue of trust that always happens between Crook and Geronimo throughout this whole entire endeavor. But it took about a year for Geronimo to show back up at San Carlos, but he held good on his promise that he had made to Crook, that he gathered everybody
he
up.
walks in, Crook's like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. I've been waiting, man. What, you needed a year?
Do you know how many people have been up my ass about you? And I've been like, just give him some more time. He'll be here.
Well, and that was also a major issue was these reservations were kind of extensions off of forts. Obviously, off of forts, you're going to have smaller cities that are built around it. You're going to have people that are paying taxes in these situations to keep these military installations open. These people are pissed because they keep bringing these Apaches back, and every single time these taxpayers see these natives that they're scared of, that they think are going to come and raid them and kill them, chances are they will if they find you. But they're pissed about these imminent threats that keep being brought back. So Crook's looked at as like, you should have just killed him. You had a chance to kill him, and you didn't kill him. We just would have put a bullet in him. We'll pay for the bullet to kill him. Don't bring him back
Crook
here.
looks at that?
Crook. That's what the taxpayers and the townspeople were saying to Crook.
yeah.
So Crook kind of falls out of favor. They do end up in Turkey Creek. Turkey Creek is fucking awesome. They said that there was plenty of grass to feed the horses that they had there.
More of the territory that was more like what they had like ancestrally been on.
So much more akin to kind of what was going on, and they actually did start to enjoy it. Like they tried to,
as much as they had to. Like again, this is like begrudgingly getting used to life and trying to find like some normalcy to it.
Yeah, and Geronimo found booze a lot heavier. He really, really liked whiskey. And living kind of this easier life, I'm sure you're getting whiskey through rations, something like that. So
I don't know if you're getting whiskey through ration for like them and everything, but I'm
so?
assuming that they're. Well, here's the thing: is they're doing things to try to make livings, whether they're trying to make goods or things like that to sell. Well, if people are buying that and you have an accessibility of things like alcohol, you're going to spend your money on that.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
I don't think they're giving I just think it was one of those things that was now readily available. And to be honest, man, like looking at it from a standpoint, from just a self-medicating standpoint, like you're now surrendering again, coming into this situation. Again, you see the writing on the wall, like your freedoms are being completely stripped away from you. You're having to live this basically neutered life and being told that you can only go these places or do these certain things. This is, I think, where it's, you're drinking to try to just like kill the pain.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really think about that, but that's certainly, you're right, it's more medicating. Part of the kind of deal that they had struck was while they were at Turkey Creek, they had the ability to grow like potatoes, corn, all that kind of good stuff. And then once they harvested it, they got to keep what they needed for their families, but then they could sell the excess. They realized that when they were giving these extras that they had to be sold, they were only getting a percentage of the money back that they were owed for what they were producing.
Yeah.
And so they asked about it. The government or the military said that it was going to something called the Apache Fund, which I'm assuming was probably something they skimmed off the top to then pay back for the rations to be able to do it. Or they were just keeping the money.
The name sounds, yes.
Yeah. So I was like, well, it's called the Apache Fund. We're the Apache, yes? Why is that fund not just going directly back to us? Like, just give us the whole thing. We don't need the Apache Fund. We're cool on that. Just give us all the money. We'll decide what the Apache Fund gets spent on. And
so it doesn't take long for anything that even looks habitable or like these reservations that at first glance they come into and they're like, well, compared to the other shitholes we've been forced into, this one's kind of nice. We have more freedom. It does not take long for the system to start being gamed and for them to start being taken advantage of, already more so than they are.
The shine really starts coming off. They also get the bad news of the production of I think it was a corn brewed beer that they would make called Tiswin gets outlawed. I'm sure they probably outlawed it because of the fights that were going on the reservation, different things like that. But also it was something that was like still their culture.
It is. And if you're also thinking about it from the standpoint of like, why do we smoke when we do these things? Because it does open up avenues for creative thinking and conversation, things like that. When you get, first of all, if they're not in control of a product that they are exclusively selling to these people and can make money back off of it, it's the same reason why isn't fucking weed legal here? Right?
Yeah.
It's because you can't make money off of it. So if they're producing their own drink, and I'm not saying it wasn't causing unrest, because of course these people are drinking because they're being fucking forced to adapt a way of life that's not theirs. They're trying to medicate. But at the same time, if you get people that are drinking and then having conversations that you don't want them to be having about shit, then you're going to be like, well, let's just fucking like cut this head off the snake and like not let them drink this shit anymore. They'll stop getting creative and stop, talking amongst each other.
Yeah.
Bringing up ideas.
It's also just one more thing of that stripping away of their culture.
Another level of control, yeah.
And it got to the point to where there was I think he was like 18 or 19. They found a Apache that was just shit-faced on Tiswin and found him with more of it. They got him prosecuted, and he was actually sent to prison at Alcatraz.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Fuck.
So he got sent from a reservation, essentially like
Just a prison.
yeah, a prison without
an
walls.
open air prison.
Yep, to Alcatraz. I felt like that was
For fucking making hooch.
yeah, just I can't imagine what that kid would feel like as soon as he showed up in Alcatraz, being from a Native American tribe in Southwest America. Like, fuck that.
Well,
That's culture shock.
Yeah, no shit. Well, while Geronimo's here, kind of word starts getting to him about, like, rumor of him being arrested. And he's like, well, fuck, like, I'm not going to let that happen. So basically, he stages a breakout one final time. And at this point, they're like, okay, $25,000 put on Geronimo's head. And this other guy comes in. Where does Miles come in here?
He was the replacement for Crook.
That's right. Yep. And he was the guy that Crook had basically been like, hey, your methods aren't working and everything. He's like, I feel like my methods are going to work, but if you're not going to let me do them, I'm out of here. And then Miles comes in.
Yeah, Miles was love. Miles, he had some weird inventions. He had set up this system of...
So he didn't put the bounty on him.
No, he didn't, but he was the one that was put in charge of finding him. But basically on all like the ridge tops and everything in the areas that they were going and searching for Geronimo in, they were putting up mirror systems to be able to send signals and Morse code back and forth from the ridge tops of these mountains. Mm-hmm. So like if they found Geronimo, you run your ass up to the mirrors on the ridge top and start SOSing to try to get this information. Their biggest issue though was Nelson had said, we're not using these Apache scouts to help us find Geronimo.
That's
we're going to go out
right.
and find him ourselves. And when you make that decision, you're basically pulling the best chance of being able to find Geronimo away.
The only reason that Crook found him in the first place.
Yeah, was because they were able to follow his trail.
Well, and not only that is last time he breaks out, he seems to take less and less people with him every time he does, but he still does take people. He's got a small band of 37?
That was after he runs into... so essentially, Miles isn't great at finding him.
Well, of course not.
He ends up getting found, and...
He's not good at finding him, and then he's found.
Well...
It takes him a while, doesn't it?
Basically, it was... They had put military along the Mexico-America border. Mm-hmm. That wasn't really working, but they had choked him back enough into the Sierra Madres that they knew exactly where to find him.
Okay.
They came to him. They basically made this offer of, hey, come back. Unfortunately, we really can't look past all of your crimes and atrocities that you've committed since you've been out. So you're probably going to be arrested. He's like, that's a non-starter. If we're going to go back anywhere, you need to promise us that all of our crimes and everything have been washed away. We've been absolved of all that shit.
Yeah.
You guys did some things. We did some things. Nobody was really proud of anything that had happened. We need to get that straight. He's like, I can't do it, man. So basically what's going to happen is you guys are going to come back. When you come back, we're actually going to send you away to a prison that's in Florida. And that's where you guys...
What the fuck is Florida?
Yeah, what is Florida? So a lot of people are like, well, we're tired of being out here. We can't really deal with this. So everybody that was still with him, I think it was only in the hundreds, left except for the final 37 Apache that had stayed with him.
Including Geronimo.
Geronimo, yeah.
And that's the whole point, too, is the people that were going to be staying probably had, some were staying with him. Women and children were going back and everything because, again, they couldn't live like that. It wasn't, unfortunately, the reservation gave them a better chance for their families to survive. So those were probably also the other people that were going to be sent to prison, and then also some loyal warriors and things like that. But he's like, I'll send these people, but I'm not going. So that's at what point he has his final 37 Apache. We're on the run. And at that point, we're being chased by 5,000 U.S. soldiers, which was a quarter of the standing U.S. Army at the time. So at one point, 1/4 of the U.S. Army was dedicated to finding Geronimo and 36 other Apache. Not only that, 3,000 Mexican soldiers on that side, and then also, what was it like?
There's 1,000 volunteers.
And of course, what was going to happen is that
$25,000 bounty.
exactly. Of course, people are looking to fucking volunteer.
And this is where we enter a guy named Charles Gatewood. Charles Gatewood, for all intents and purposes, seems like a pretty sweet dude. He had actually come back. I believe Miles is out at this point and somebody else was appointed because they had brought the Apache scouts back. And
Charles Gatewood also, like, where you have a general, he's in charge of a lot of these other, like, 5,000 soldiers at this point, like, trying to find. So if you have, like, smaller areas, he's not able to keep an eye on doing everything. If Gatewood is like, hey, we can find him, and the easiest way to find him is to use scouts, I'm just not going to tell this fucking guy because he's not going to care once I find him.
yeah,
So if anything, that's, I think I see it more of that just based on his rank. I don't see him stepping in where Miles was. But I think that he was kind of operating how he wanted to actually do it.
He was almost more of a liaison. Like, he was put back out there. One of the reasons that he was he had actually spent a lot of time with the Apache and he had learned their language. Mm-hmm. So he was a white man that was able to speak their language, which immediately racked you up the cool level with the Apaches.
At least some level of trustworthiness in that you dedicated enough time to do this. Of course, it's still completely skeptical because everything they've promised you is full of shit. But at that point too, again, once you're being chased for that long, and again, Geronimo at this point, he's getting up there in age. It's not like he's still, I think, even in his 40s. In 83 and 79, he would be 50. And in 83, he's 50. So, I mean, dude, 50, and this is not nowadays 52. This ain't fucking Brad Pitt being like almost 60. This is a fucking hard life
That has been wounded 8 times in
52.
war. Yeah.
And
it's
so
a lot of years.
Yeah, so eventually he does end up surrendering to Gatewood, and the remaining Chiricahua, did I pronounce that right? Chiricahua.
Yeah, Chiricahua.
Were sent to a prison in Florida.
So Gatewood,
That's fucking nuts, dude. Like, it's not even like what? Why Florida? Like, that's what I got to wonder about. First of all, it's like, you didn't have any place. Were you just trying to get them so far away that they had no option or no? Because they were sending them people to reservations there.
prisons, but there were prisons off of forts, and this whole deal that they were doing to the Apache wasn't just exclusive to that. There were tribes that were down in Florida. The Seminole, I think, were down there. So they had probably already established this system down there. That, and if you send them anywhere outside of where they live, like an environment like Florida, the fuck are they going to escape to?
Yeah.
They have nowhere to run.
Yeah. There's water on 3 sides of this thing.
Yeah. So, Gatewood's, the way that he caught up to Geronimo was pretty cool. He had 2 Apaches that had been out there, the scouts that were helping him find him. The band of 37 saw the scouts. They saw Gatewood. Gatewood says, hang back. Let's come back down the hill. Basically, let's let them come to us. Mm-hmm. After a while, nothing happens. Gatewood sends the 2 scouts up to run into the 37 Apache that were still out there. Geronimo's like, kill them both. And everybody else that had run into the scouts was like, no, they're Apache. They're us. They're their scouts. They're working for them, but we're not going to kill our own people. You've already incurred a lot of losses for us, so you say kill them. I say let's let them meet with you. They go up. The 2 scouts talk to Geronimo. They say the Gatewood's down there. He ends up taking a meeting with Gatewood. They sit down. Geronimo beats the drum again. He's like, if I go in, you can't charge me or anybody else with anything. He's like, man, I can't make that deal. You know that I'm not the guy that makes that deal. I'm just a lieutenant. You need to talk to the general. And at this time,
I feel like this is we're watching a procedural. Like, I can't make that deal, guy.
Yeah.
I can't make that deal.
Grover Cleveland had already passed down that he needed to be murdered on sight, but the army had basically made the decision that he was going to be brought in alive. Mm-hmm. Eventually, Gatewood wears him down. They, as they're coming back into America, Gatewood had taken everybody else that...
They had him, I think, in chains at this point, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a big concern, though, because as they were coming back across the border, everybody in America knew that he was coming back across the border, so they were just going to kill him.
Yeah.
So they left guards at the dividing line at the border of the countries. And as they came across and they saw the guards, they're like, "What the fuck, man? We were coming back." And
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, we need to protect you, though." And he's like, "No. What, you need to protect us? We're the ones that need to be protected from you. What do you need to protect us from?" And they're like, "Well, everybody else kind of wants to kill you." So as they're coming back up, they're then met by two other officers who have a death warrant, an arrest warrant for Geronimo.
A death or arrest?
I think it was an arrest warrant, but
Okay.
I think it was for murder. As they came back up, they were concerned about going back to the reservation and not having food again. So Geronimo and everybody stole 450 head of cattle leaving Mexico that they brought back up into America to feed themselves. The guy's like, you can't take that up here. You stole that, right? And he's like, "Yeah, but I need to take it with us. This is our food." When the guy shows...
But food.
Yeah, he's like, no, we got it right here. Like,
Well, you can have some.
we'll leave it. Well, you know what? You can choose snout to tail, whatever you want. You can have this guy. But they get met by these two guys that have this arrest order. Gatewood doesn't want that to happen. He doesn't. He knows that once he gets arrested for murder,
Once he's out of
killed.
Gatewood's custody or sight,
bad shit's gonna happen.
correct.
Yeah.
And then it might be Gatewood's ass. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Gatewood has the bright idea to go ahead and give the two guys that were going to wait overnight to take Geronimo some whiskey that night. He ends up getting them shit-faced. And as they pass out for the night, Gatewood tells Geronimo and everybody to go ahead and scurry off, to head back to the reservation where they were headed. But to take off now, because if they take off now, by the time the two guys that want him arrested and brought back that way are going to wake up and be like, "Where is he?" They wake up in the morning, Gatewood's there, all the Native Americans, all the cattle and everything are gone. And Gatewood's just standing there. The guy's like, "What the fuck? How'd you let him get away?" He's like, "I didn't let him get away. They snuck away. I was out too. I don't know." He goes, "No, you gave me the alcohol. You're the reason that we got so drunk. Yeah, it's your fault that we passed out and blacked out and don't remember anything, not us." Gatewood goes, "Prove it." The guy's like, "I can't. I was drunk and passed out. I don't remember anything." He goes, "So you can't prove that I didn't let them go and that they didn't sneak
So
out?"
then how does he end up getting sent to Florida?
They go back to the reservation. That was their choice.
And at that point,
Because
okay.
Gatewood had told them that everybody that was leaving and everybody that they had left at the reservation before had already been shipped to Florida, and the only way that they were going to be able to see their families or anything again was to turn themselves in to go back to Florida.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
So they were supposed to be reunited back when they got to Florida.
And the ways that, you're, thinking about the ways they would transport them, basically it's kind of a prison camp situation where they would load them onto fucking railway cars. Just in inhumane conditions and fucking send them on their way. And again, this is just like across like a large portion of the continental United States to fucking Florida just to go to these prison camps. So when they get to Florida as well, you run into not only an environment that you're not used to, you're at a prison camp, but now you're taking people from a certain area that have not been exposed to certain illnesses and viruses, and you're putting them in essentially an environment in which they fucking thrive.
Well, what's
Malaria?
yeah, what's the worst thing about living around a bunch of swamps?
Yeah, the mosquitoes.
The mosquitoes are going to get you. I think they said that 19 people died of malaria while they were in Florida. And just all the other elements that they just absolutely got tore up in. Just all this, like you say, all the sicknesses, the malaria is getting them. Eventually, when they're moved to Alabama, they can't really deal with that either because it's a climate that's closer to New Mexico. But at the same time, these forests are so thick. They said that at one point it was the first time they had heard a coyote howl because there weren't going to be any coyotes in Florida. Mm-hmm. All the women started weeping because it was the first coyote that they had heard howl since they were back in.
Well, and one of the reasons, too, we forgot to mention it. So Geronimo, one of the reasons he accepts the surrender or to surrender to Gatewood is because although he does tell them that he's going to have to basically go and serve at a POW camp for 2 years, that after that, he's going to be reunited with his people who are at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. So that's another reason why he actually agrees and goes to do this.
He didn't know he was going for too much hard labor. He just knew that he was going to a prison camp, and they'd actually moved everybody to Alabama before Geronimo had gotten there.
Mm-hmm.
So when he showed up, he was told that they were going to be reunited with his people in Florida. He shows up there, they're not there anymore.
Okay.
So it becomes almost more of like a fuck you situation of cat and mouse to like, hey, we promised you get to be with your people again. And he has like children that had already been moved that he had left behind and wives.
Yeah.
So he has a reason to want to come back and to see these people again. He shows up.
I just think he's fucking tired at this point, man. Just exhausted and everything like that.
And 2 years of hard labor doesn't sound like a very
He's also like in his 50s.
enjoyable thing.
And as if like it couldn't get any crazier, like, well, what happened? Did he die as a POW? This is when it gets even crazier because now he's lived long enough that we're entering this weird modern age. And it's almost like the people that are on the on the East Coast of the United States, they've heard about all this kind of stuff with the American Apache Wars and everything like that. But it's hearing about something and it being sensationalized and never being able to see anything like that. And so, as a prisoner of war, he was kind of like weirdly, he was like, all of his rights were he was on loan for shit to like the fucking government. And he was put on
tour.
Yes. And he was like pulled out. And they're like, because Geronimo to like that section of people over on the East Coast was like the worst Native American threat. Like he'd been sensationalized as this like mass murder and everything like that. But people love to see a fucking sideshow. And so he was put on display at expositions in like 1990 or 1898, 1901, and the fucking St. Louis World's Fair in 1904.
So I don't know how to go about this.
Like, what the fuck do you like? And this is the Geronimo booth, or this is the Geronimo exhibit. And he's just like, hey.
I don't want to enjoy this, but I feel like for as much shit as he went through and being a POW sucks, I'm pretty happy he got to go to the World's Fair. Because what they did is they would set up a booth where people could come take pictures with him. Mm-hmm. He would get, like, I think it was 40 to 50% of whatever he was getting for the pictures they would pay him for.
He could also sell stuff.
Yeah. He also sold his signature for like 10 cents a signature or something like that. So when you look up like his Wikipedia or you see it, you can actually see a signature by Geronimo.
And
how cool is that?
What's nuts too is based on like what you're talking about. So they said when he died, he had about $10,000 in his like bank account, and that equates to I think close to $400,000 today. So just think of the fact that he's a prisoner of war with the equivalent of $400,000 in money that he's made off of like doing this stuff and on these expositions and shit, and able to like, you know, he was selling stuff on not the side of the road, but like when he would go set up these booths and everything, like he had stuff that was being made by the other POWs or other tribes people. They said that he would be wearing a button on his jacket, and someone would come up and like offer to buy the button off. Like, I got to have the button off your jacket. Like, just it's on you. He would sell it to them. And then he would turn around and go backstage, sew another button on his jacket, and come back out. It's just, and I'm not saying like that's so weird to like, he assimilated, not assimilated, but he almost found ways like, if I'm going to have to live like this, I can take advantage of these fucking pale faces. And he just found a way to like in a weird way, he still somehow found a way to like stick it. He's like, I'll just fucking take your money if you guys are going to be dumb enough to pay me for this, like, this like kind of stuff.
And at the World's Fair, just in his autobiography, it was that chapter that I sent you. Did you listen to it?
No, I haven't.
So he talks about being at the fair, and he had handlers there. So he had his booth that he would work. Mm-hmm. And then on his off hours, they would take him around the fair. So he says that he was loaded up on this train car with viewing windows out the side with the two security that were with him. And they're like, get ready for some shit, man. He's like, what's going to happen? And then he said that as soon as he could see the ground, he heard a mighty roar of the engine. Mm-hmm. And then all he could see was the sky. And he said that it was so scary to be that far off the ground that the people looked like ants. They took Geronimo on the fucking Ferris wheel. and he didn't understand how the Ferris wheel was working and
that's
bringing him
fucking
up in the
nuts.
air. They said that they brought him to, or he said that they went and saw I believe it was like a magic show or something like that. And he talks about seeing this is all very sad stuff, and I'm trying to make it sound fun, but just understand, not great stuff. They said that they had taken an African American, he said African American, I'm sure that probably wasn't his word that he used, but they had bound him to a chair, and then he had torn his way out of a chair. So he was like this rough, tough brute that Geronimo really respected because he thought it was some sort of
breaking the bonds of
show.
the fucking white man.
They took him to a magician, and he said that he saw a woman crawl inside of a wicker basket and pull a red blanket over the top of her, and then the man stabbed the basket, and he's like, I thought she was dead immediately, and then all of a sudden he pulls it off. Somehow she contorted herself away, or she had some sort of a
He
magical
didn't understand
shield.
that or anything.
He
but,
had
like,
no
just thought
idea
it
what was going on. They brought him to a pygmy exhibit, which hopefully pygmies, it's a rough word. But
It's the word appropriate for the time. You're fine.
like little people that were there. And he said that he didn't like how they were so slovenly dressed and that they didn't have any manners, and that they had been brought over to America, and his handlers had told him that they had been brought here to learn manners to then be taken back to their island to teach their people manners. Like, he's seeing all this new shit through these eyes that have no idea anything about the world.
And he's so old at this point too. Like he's in, I think
he's learning everything for the first time.
exactly at this point. Like he's seen all of this stuff, and then all of a sudden there's a picture of him driving a car.
Yeah.
With like 2 or 3 other Indians with him and everything, and he's standing in the drive, and he's dressed. He's completely like, you can tell they dressed him like it's in like almost a fucking. I don't know if it was a top hat, but it's like a 3-piece suit, and it's the one with the big wheel that sticks straight up and everything.
Yeah.
But even more so to where he rode on horseback during Teddy Roosevelt's 1905 inaugural parade. Teddy Roosevelt forced him to ride.
It was like him and I think 4 other chiefs.
And he was basically like, look, we're all of us are okay. Like we're all all of the Indians, all of them said, hey, we're all good, guys. We're all good.
We like being prisoners of war.
He went to Teddy Roosevelt and actually asked him, and he's like, hey, because he met with him later that week, and he was like, can the Chiricahua please be released as POWs, and can we please return to Arizona? He's like, oh no, that can't happen. He's like, do you know how many people you've killed? And he's like, that's not going to happen.
Well, he's probably like, you know how many people you killed? George was like, do you know how many people you've killed?
Exactly. But just like walking him out as a fucking sideshow, and I know we talk about that, it's just so. It's not for the fact of what it was. It's for the breadth of life that this guy had to have seen. And then at the very end, when he's in his 70s, he's seeing all this stuff, and he's just like, when did the world become this?
Yeah, he actually made a remark that he's cool with the American people, cool with the white people, because they were only nice to him at the World's Fair. And he believed that they were all the good people. So, like, he kind of understood.
How much of that was being, read the cards.
Well,
I like the white people. The white people are good as far as the lighter skinned people go.
So his autobiography was actually dictated through a translator to the superintendent of the Oklahoma School District that Fort Sill was around. And they had to write to basically everybody in the military to get authorization, and it actually made it all the way to FDR, who gave the final approval, or Teddy that gave the final approval. And so this was like him dictating it. Then they would go through and read it, and they could cut things out, or they could add addendums. So like he would tell a story, and then there would be a U.S. addendum of what they say that happened.
Okay.
But there was still like enough to where you could tell it was his voice. And the way that you can tell it was his voice at the end of the passage of Trusting White People is just completely unprovoked. I told you about this a couple days ago.
I'm going to remain skeptical. I believe it's in there, but based upon, I'm going to remain skeptical on that.
Just completely unprovoked. He goes, I know if this was the Mexicans at the World's Fair,
Yeah.
I would have to fight my way out, and I would have to take up arms against everybody in there. So, like, he still throws a shot at the Mexican people.
There's Geronimo.
Yeah, he was still in there. He also converted himself to Christianity.
They said he went to church a couple times. I don't know how much. That's the biggest thing is like...
He also says that
We talked about the Stockholm Syndrome thing and like being amazed by this kind of stuff and the Flash and everything. I don't know, man. I think he'd just seen so much and been through so much in his fucking life. And it's so weird that he just like... For a while, what if it was just as simple things like, when you go on vacation and you kind of assimilate to that culture because it's fun and exciting and everything like that. If it was just him trying to make the best of a bad situation, be like, I'm having to do this shit anyway. I might as well just try to take advantage of this situation. But there had to be a part of him, if he's asking to, be released back to Arizona, he wants to go back and just try to live that lifestyle to a certain degree again. And the fact that he was denied doing that, I think that really led to probably more so what was going to be, and at that point, he's 75 years old. It's going to lead the decline, and then that ends up where he kind of meets the, unfortunately, like a unceremonious end in February of 1909. So he's basically riding his horse. I don't know back from where, but he had been drinking and everything, and basically fell off of or was thrown from his horse, and was left outside in the rain for the whole night. And then contracts pneumonia. And at that point, when you're that age, you've lived that fucking much of life. It probably doesn't take much to finish it off.
No, you just need a little butterfly kiss into the next realm.
Uh-huh.
What were his final words? It was, I should have died.
He's like, I regret my final surrender. He's like, I wish I never would have surrendered. So that's what I'm saying. The fact that he requested to go back, was denied, and then just simply like looking back on it, yeah, he was making the best of a bad situation in that time frame, but at the same time making some money. But maybe he was like, I can use this money and go back and try to like help my people or some shit. Or maybe he was just like, I just want to go back and live a comfortable life. But the fact that he never got that chance, and I'm based on what we kind of talked about at the beginning of this, or maybe we talked about it kind of just texting back and forth, but this is really something where there weren't like good sides and bad sides. There were just sides and everything. And I'm just, like we kind of discussed, I'm so fucking... The most impressive thing about this is that this guy lived to 79 years old.
Yeah. It's a hard-lived life. He was rode hard and put away wet. And to be able to survive just all the skirmishes and raids and everything like that.
And to not get killed. Well, to never get into a situation where, like, think how easy that could have happened, where he gets picked up by one of these bands that he's surrendering to, and one of the guys is like, my brother was killed by one of your, and like just turn around and to shoot him or something.
Yeah, to be able to dodge that.
That's what I'm saying, is that it's this weird like aura that he had, that he never found himself in a situation, despite being like wanted enough to warrant 1/4 of the U.S. Army going after him and that kind of resources, to not have died during any of that, and then you end up falling off your horse.
And especially at a time where America was more concerned with like Reconstruction in the South after the Civil War, that they're still dedicating that kind of a force to try to take in Geronimo. Yeah. Like, the fact that he didn't get to see the light as much light as it can be at the end of the tunnel, but 4 years later, the Apache were basically set free as POWs. They were allowed to go back to the Mescalero Reservation, because the Mescalero Reservation is in New Mexico, but they weren't allowed to go back to Arizona. So it's sort of like a half win, but at the same time, through everything that he had fought for to try to basically get his people back and to save his people from going into bondage and reservations. Yeah. Like, he didn't get to see it. So I feel like there's not a lot of payoff. They still went in,
but at least they bettered there's as much as it could have been bettered and everything. But
yeah, he's like, we had kind of tried to circle this in the beginning. I think I had a little trouble with it, and I think you did too. But as far as like trying to tell a story where somebody's good and somebody's bad, there were really no heroes in this. It was
everyone just doing what they felt was right. It was the Apache trying to preserve their way of life and keep their ancestral lands and everything like that. Yeah. Which is why it's it's much easier to be like, well, in this situation, there were victims on all sides, but there is a start to this whole thing. And like we were talking about even before the podcast, everyone, that looks from all the issues from outside their own country, I think they look at other countries and like, that's your thing. Yeah. That's your shitty thing that you did. There's stuff in every country, but it takes, the thing with this country is stuff like this gets glossed over so much. The fact that like, this is our thing. This is when we marched in and took lands from people and put them in reservations and all this kind of shit. So, there's definitely a side to blame in this. And the fact that it's still something that doesn't have as much focus on it with the fucking reservation system and everything like that today.
That we still see today. You have ICWA, you have the child adoption off of tribal lands and reservations is a very hot button issue right now. But it's sort of one of those things where it's okay to look at something like this and be like, hey, we fucked up. You don't got to feel terrible about it. Yeah. But it's okay to just recognize that
it's better to know this stuff, to understand and be like, we're not fucking like innocent in this. Like, we're not always the good. We've been the good guys at certain points and we've been the fucking villains at, other points. Probably more so the villains. And that could be said for everyone, but everyone just wants to always remember the good stuff and the positives that happen and everything. And so as you go into your Thanksgiving holiday to be around family and friends, and to avoid hot button issues, drop some Geronimo knowledge on those people.
Yeah, that could be a hot button issue too. Maybe just keep it...
not at all.
Keep it surface level.
Not at all.
Enjoy your turkeys. Everybody overseas, enjoy whatever you guys do that's sort of like Thanksgiving. If you have anything like this from other countries, obviously, because maybe if you didn't know about this, there's some shit that we didn't know about. If you would like to send us a message on social media or email or anything like that, something that we can look into from your country and maybe sort of get a better understanding of it, that would be cool.
That'd be fucking cool, like the South American Geronimo.
Yeah, of your country. Yeah, anything like that. Just very interested in everything around the world. We like to talk about the stuff that we learn. We also like to learn from you guys, too, and kind of find some shit that we didn't know about.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us for another week. Have a happy freaking holiday, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Be safe. Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is Historically High Pod, Historically High POD, and we are on Twitter at Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.